Hi Wildlings, I'm back for one more speculatory video in my album Rollout series for Fletcher's double album drop, the In Search of Antidote album and Finding Rewilding. And basically I'm here to close the In Search of the Antidote chapter by going over all of the songs again, now with 2020 hindsight and having had the album for 3 months to sit with. And giving my final opinions on the story and the muses and all that sort of stuff. Because, by now, I understand the album totally differently. And, basically I understand the album to be a bit of a mix of my 2 separate videos in this series. My part 1 of when the album first dropped mixed with my part 2 when I'd sat with the album for like a month, I think. Obviously, some of my opinions changed and there were some things on the album that were like starting to tingle my spidey senses. I was like a little bit conflicted then about what the album was about and how much of an influence I had on the album, because obviously like I am all over that album. My stink is on basically every song. I was like trying to figure out how much the songs were about me how much I was like influencing the music, maybe is a better way to put it. Now I think I've reached a happy medium. Now I think I understand like what the vibe is. So I want to go back over all the music and talk about it all again. And if you've seen the first 2 parts, that's going to make this part make so much more sense, because those 2 parts explain all the lore behind all the songs, like how the Finding Rewilding lore appears in all of the songs. Like in this video, I'm going to talk more about, that happy medium little balance that I've found in understanding what all the songs are about, really. And so after we close the In Search of Antidote chapter, all of those songs, that I now, see a little bit differently now that I've had the album for 3 months, I want to talk about, what I'm expecting to happen in terms of the Finding Rewilding reveal and exactly when I'll see Carrie and when the album will drop and when the Lesbian Crush music video will drop. So that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be closing the In Search of Antidote chapter and having my final guess of how the Finding Rewilding bomb is going to drop, and going over all the clues that I've seen about how everything's going to pan out. So let's get into the video. My final thoughts on the In Search of the Antidote album is that, it is definitely a huge album about healing. Like, it is definitely a healing-orientated album, definitely a very reflective album, definitely, a walk down memory lane through so many, relationships and muses from Carrie's past. Like, I don't think a single song has a single muse to it. Like, I think there's multiple muses on every single song. It's definitely a walk down memory lane. I think what I was talking about in my first speculatory video before the album dropped about how I thought it was going to be kind of like a compilation of like all the red muses is pretty right. In terms of, what the album seems to be about. Like, it definitely seems to be about, heaps of past relationships, all of those kind of like red relationships. Particular kind of like wounds that were like left behind from a lot of those relationships, or from inner child stuff. And now it's making like way more sense to me why Carrie used the 3 of Swords to represent this album when she initially teased it in the Lead Me On music video. And that's because the 3 of Swords is a card obviously about healing. It's about all the times that we feel separate from love, based on it actually describes that our, first wound was being separated from source to incarnate on earth. And basically every time that we experience pain and suffering in our life from our birth onwards, is because, that initial wound is being reactivated, re-triggered. To me, the In Search of Antidote album is literally just a walk down Carrie's past relationships and all the times that she felt separate from love, separate from truth, and had that, feeling of being separate from source reactivated. So the Three of Swords is just like such a perfect card to represent this album, like for real, for real. Now that I understand it way better, and can, put how I understand it into words. And the thing about the Three of Swords, when you get the Three of Swords in like any of your tarot like spreads, if you pull that card for yourself, usually like the healing for that card, like whenever you get that card, it's usually asking you to embrace like more truth and love, like even difficult truths. It's asking you to like step into truth and love and stepping away from feeling separate from truth and love. And yeah, I think that's like so the vibe in terms of what the In Search of Antidote album is. It's like a real reflection of like every time Carrie was stepping away from truth and love. And, obviously the album ends up with the song Antidote, which is about her stepping into truth and love. And I think that's like the perfect way to end the In Search of Antidote album, because I'm expecting the Finding Rewilding album to essentially be like a huge like stepping into truth and love. And a lot about that work of like continuously trying to step into truth and love and noticing when, you're not stepping into truth and love, and then trying to step back into it. Like that's really what I'm expecting the Finding Rewilding story arc to be about, now that I understand what the In Search of Antidote album story arc is. Like I think, yeah, the In Search of Antidote album is more an exploration of all the times that Carrie potentially felt separate from truth and love. And I think the Finding Rewilding album is going to be about all the times that she was like stepping towards truth and love. And so, yeah, like, I don't know, the album, like the story is hitting different. It's like very cute. I think the story of the album is essentially pinpointing moments with her and I and how that affected her past and her perception of the past and her healing of the past. And I think that's why the tracks are in the order that they're in, because now that I think about the album this way, I'm realizing that every single track aligns chronologically with a moment her and I experienced, that either created like healing from the past just in itself, or it triggered something, like a situation with her and I triggered something that then ended up generating some healing from the past, even if, it wasn't super pleasant to begin with. And that's why like all of the songs have like some sort of like touch of me on it. I think it's like supposed to symbolize like that, these moments that we had together, like I was like touching her in a way that it was like affecting her past and her healing. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of the vibe. Like every single song has like little Finding Rewilding hints, which is why I was like so confused by some of the songs, because I was like, like you're talking so specifically about, moments that I could see that we'd kind of like experience things together, and putting so many Finding Rewilding references into all the songs. And so, like I think that's very poetic. Like I think that's very symbolic of the antidote antidoting. Like the antidote touched all the music the same way that the antidote touched all the past relationships and offered healing. For example, I think Maybe I Am is set in July when, like the whole Becky So Hot drama was like in full swing, because essentially that's what the song Maybe I Am is about, like the peak Becky So Hot era when, like a lot of people in the public, as well as someone from her past, were like aggravating things within her, making her feel, like a bad person, not empathetic, and, whatever else it is. Like that's what that song is about. It's like a really painful moment where, I think a lot of people were separate from love and truth in the way that they were perceiving her. And then, she was taking on that truth as real instead of staying in truth and love herself and, knowing that she isn't that person that all these people were projecting onto her to be. And so obviously she was experiencing pain and suffering because, everyone was projecting. And instead of being able to stay in truth and love, she was taking on everyone else's truth as her truth. Hence why the song has a very like gaslighty like kind of feel to it. And this was obviously happening in July, which was when we crossed paths for the first time. We crossed paths for the first time when she commented on one of my videos on the 17th of July. And I think that's also why the song Maybe I Am talks about burning things down, because, you know, like I've said in the past that, you know, I think Becky's So Hot, like, while like I didn't receive the song super well, and, you know, obviously her putting out the song didn't go down super well for her either. At the same time, like, it was such a match, it was such a fire, that, you know, led to us being connected. Like, we were the phoenix that rose from the ashes of the fire that she started by releasing Becky So Hot. And so it makes sense for her to be talking about, like, burning things down in Maybe I Am, because it's really like burning down the past. And I think that's what allowed us to like cross paths and walk into each other's lives. Like, her being prepared to burn down the past was kind of like the instigator that brought us together. And then Doing Better is obviously set between September 2022 and the 1st of January 2023. September was the first time she messaged me. She messaged me on the 9th of September, the 9th of the 9th, at 1:02 a.m. And yeah, that was obviously, you know, kind of started the snowball, because yeah, she followed me and messaged me in September. And so, yeah, like I think Doing Better also marks those first few months for us where we were like developing crushes on each other. And by December, that's when I like kind of realized what this was. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had a feeling before then. I had a feeling since I saw her show in August, because I just remember walking out of that show feeling night and day different, after I saw her and like experienced her energy in real life. Like, I just felt so different walking in and out of that show. And yeah, by December 2022, that's when I was like, realized what this was, that this was the thing. And that's what, yeah, kind of got me to stay in the thing, you know what I'm saying? Because before then I was like very prepared to dip. Like, even early December, I was like planning on going when she didn't message me. Like, I literally messaged her and said that, you know, I'm out. But yeah, then I ended up staying. And so, yeah, like, I think Doing Better, like, obviously is about, you know, her struggles with kind of like fame in the music industry and having to do things, you know, a certain way, based on, you know, the marketing ethos of the label that she's signed to, but that not feeling aligned for her. And, you know, all the rewards that come from like doing it the way that, you know, this label wants to do it, like, didn't feel worth it. And yeah, like the feeling of not being in control of her life, not being able to do things in a way that feels aligned with her is like, you know, kind of fucking her up. And yeah, I think that was, yeah, maybe based on, us being connected, or at least that was what was going on for her at the time, that we were kind of like moving from just having crushes on each other to like fully like realizing what our connection was. And if you watch my Doing Better song reaction video on this channel, I talk way more about, you know, what I think the song Doing Better is talking about in terms of highlighting the process of her waking up to how not aligned this label is, with her current label that she's, you know, leaving very soon. Yeah, like that song definitely kind of, I think, explains the trajectory of her kind of waking up to that. But yeah, I do think essentially that the implementation of the Finding Rewilding strategy, which I think was implemented in September 2022, I think that's when they devised the strategy, not long after she messaged me for the first time. Yeah, I think, yeah, like when that strategy got implemented, I think that's when she was like really realizing that, you know, this is not the vibe. Because obviously, you know, she had a similar problem in terms of the Becky So Hot marketing strategy, which you can watch my marketing video on this channel if you want to see all of the signs that that marketing strategy was also fake, also manufactured for the sake of virality, and that she wasn't necessarily down with that strategy, given all the signs of visible contempt in her body language as she's executing the strategy. Yeah, I don't think she kind of realized fully that the vibe wasn't vibing until the Finding Rewilding strategy was devised. Like, I think she kind of like woke up to that, and that's what the song Doing Better is really about. It's like waking up to like how not the vibe, like this the way this business operates, what their marketing ethos is, how not the vibe that is for her. Yeah, that's like essentially the doing better. The point of that song, like I think it's about how, you know, the situation with her and being forced into, or well, coerced into like manufacturing another fake scenario for the sake of virality, and it having to do with me, like this time, like really understanding how, like the label was the fucking problem, and like doing better kind of like starts to initiate that healing of like, oh, I need to quit. Like, I need to quit this label. I need to like do all of this stuff differently. I need to like not be bound by these contracts that are like pushing me into a corner, that, you know, obviously make me a lot of money, but make me incredibly sad and not in control of my own life. So yeah, I think that's essentially how finding rewilding shows up in the song Doing Better, and how finding rewilding provides healing in the song Doing Better. I think ego talking came from my very first YouTube video on this channel, where I was talking about who tames the ego and wilds the soul. Obviously, I think, you know, based on me in that video talking about, you know, that quote that I wrote, and also how Becky So Hot made me feel when it dropped. Yeah, I think that was the inspiration for the song Ego Talking. And, you know, if you want to know more about that lore, you can go watch my video about the In Search of Antidote tour visuals, because, yeah, Carrie definitely made some references to like ego talking in, and like, yeah, used some of that lore from the very first YouTube video in her visuals for the Antidote tour. And so, yeah, if you want to know more of the lore about where ego talking came from, you can watch the very first YouTube video on this channel, and then also the In Search of the Antidote tour visuals breakdown. But yeah, I think, yeah, essentially, like when I was talking about all that stuff in the very first YouTube video, that was potentially what sparked the idea for writing Becky So Hot again, like writing a Becky So Hot 2.0 that was more from a position of being aware of the ego, being aware of like the stories that the ego sells us, and how that was influencing the writing of Becky So Hot 1.0. I think the song Lead Me On is the only song out of order in this, you know, kind of like story arc, and I think that is mostly just for commercial reasons. I think Lead Me On was pulled up from actually being towards the end of the story arc, up towards the front of the album, for the sake of when you release an album, the streams tend to die off the further down the album people get. And so it usually pays to put some of your stronger songs towards the front. And so I'll come back to Lead Me On when I think it's actually relevant to the plot. Okay, so the song Two Things Can Be True is a little complicated because obviously the first time Carrie kind of publicly said this like two things can be true thing, it was in the Call Her Daddy interview, which dropped on the 12th of October, which was 2 days after my first video on this YouTube channel, hence why I think it comes like next in the sequence, in the order of, you know, all the milestones. And in the episode, Carrie talks about this like idea two things can be true as coming from her friend Kelsey Ballerini, like conceptually coming from her. So in the interview, she's like quoted saying, you know, my friend Kelsey Ballerini says this thing, two things can be true. But I don't think like the song is actually set when Carrie said that. I think she was using like her saying that quote in the interview to cover up what the song is really about, so that when the album dropped, people wouldn't know who that song is about. I think the song is actually about Carrie's friendship breakdown with Olivia O'Brien that happened in August 2023. If you don't know what happened with the friendship breakdown, you can go back and watch my very first video in this series where I was speculating about what would be on the album, and I was speculating that songs about Olivia O'Brien would be on the album. Because, you know, obviously I saw all of that go down and just assumed it would be on the album. I'm not going to lie, when the album dropped, I was like, you know, a little bit thinking this might be about Olivia, but I wasn't 100% certain until I saw Olivia posting promo for her EP that was released like a week or so ago. where she was using lots of like wedding imagery, and, you know, like inviting people to a divorce, because, yeah, obviously in the song there's this line to I do. And, you know, I'm assuming those girlies in their little situationship must have been making those sort of plans. You know what I'm saying? Like, as soon as I saw Olivia like posting that sort of stuff, I was like, oh, it is about her. The thing that threw me off was obviously when Fletcher did her interview on the Zach Sang show, I think. She was talking about track 5, and she was talking about the fact that it was about a straight girl. And, you know, Olivia's always given me, you know, bi vibes. So, you know, that's definitely what threw me off. I was like, I don't know if it is about Olivia then. You know what I'm saying? Like when Carrie said in the interview that it was about someone who was straight. And at the time I was like, that could be because Carrie's trying to make out that the song is about Kelsey, even though it's not. Because, yeah, obviously there's a reason why she titled the track Two Things Can Be True, and why she, you know, took that quote out of an interview where she was talking about that quote came from Kelsey Ballerini. Like, obviously she was using Kelsey to kind of like cover up who a lot of the songs were about. Kelsey was definitely being used as a cover to cover up my songs as well as Olivia's songs, I think. Like, obviously Kelsey was a cover on Lead Me On. And then, yeah, she was also a cover on Two Things Can Be True. But, you know, for sure, Kelsey's been in on it the whole time. They've been, like, in communication the whole time. They've definitely not had a falling out. And so, yeah, that was what was throwing me. I was like, I don't know if she said it's about a straight girl just for the sake of leading people to believe that it was about Kelsey, because she definitely has lied a few times when she's talked about the album. Like, I've been catching her in little white lies here and there. And I couldn't tell if that was a lie to mislead people, or if it was actually about someone who was straight and maybe the muse wasn't Olivia. And that's what made me think that it might be about the girl in New York, because the thing about me is I don't know about, you know, the girl in New York. Like, I wasn't around for that time, so I don't know how she identifies. All I knew was what Carrie said in the original Call Her Daddy interview, and, you know, she said that girl had ended up with a guy after, and I didn't know if that was the situation, if Olivia had kind of left the situationship with Carrie for a guy. So, yeah, like, it was hard to say. Like, I was definitely tossing up between the two, but then, you know, I think, yeah, a few things tipped me over the edge and lent me towards the girl in New York in the end, because I was just like, I'm going to assume that Carrie's not lying, even though, I don't know, even though, like, I was definitely seeing her lie a fair bit. I was like, I'll assume she's not lying about, you know, it being about a straight girl, and I'll just assume that it's about the girl in New York, given that Carrie was talking about the girl in New York and how she ended up hooking up with a dude that Carrie had previously hooked up in the same interview as she got the quote from. I was like, that's just logical. I'm going to go with that for now. And so, yeah, when you assume that Carrie's been lying to cover up or protect who the real muses of a lot of the songs are, and therefore disregard the straight girl comment, like, the song fits Olivia. Olivia makes the most sense for the song because, you know, they definitely don't talk. You know, I can see why Carrie might regret that. And I can see why, you know, she tried to keep Olivia in her life. Like, I think the actual, like romantic side of the relationship breakdown happened potentially before I was on the scene, or sometime in 2022, I'm assuming, was when they, you know, stopped whatever, you know, sexual nature of their relationship was, whatever kind of like casual situationship they had going on was. And it seems like from Carrie's side of the story, it seems like, you know, Olivia was with some dude around that time. But yeah, like the actual friendship part didn't break down until August the next year in 2023, which, yeah, I think that's why was I delusional thinking we could stay in each other's lives line makes sense for Olivia too, because obviously they were trying to be friends. And obviously they spent all of 2023, like ever since I've been on the scene, trying to be friends. So yeah, like that, it all makes sense. It makes sense, like this ending the song with the reference to I do as in weddings because obviously Olivia released her EP and I didn't listen to it all the way through, but I did read the lyrics. And yeah, it seems like, yeah, they were like making plans like that. You know what I'm saying? Even though it wasn't official. So yeah, like it all fits Olivia the best. So I really think it's about her. But anyway, as far as how this relates to kind of like the finding rewilding healing, is, you know, I think I was actually pretty close to being on the money when I made my first prediction video, because in that video I talked about how I thought this song would talk about how Carrie was maybe yearning for someone to recognize her masculine energy without her needing to be a man. And, you know, that's kind of what the song's about. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, obviously that refers back to a TikTok that I made where I specifically called Carrie out for saying two things can be true. Like I slipped that into the video and was like, I love it when she says two things can be true because that's such a reflection of her energy. And I was talking about her astrology chart and how like her masculine placements are in feminine signs and her feminine placements are in masculine signs. And, you know, her most feminine placement, her Venus, is in Aries, which is the most masculine sign, and is, you know, and tends to make Venus operate more masculine, like as a more masculine energy, so more pursuing and less attracting. And so, yeah, like I think my like initial like kind of predictions were pretty right in terms of, yeah, me thinking this song was going to be about some sort of like yearning to be able to be that like kind of masculine energy in relationships. And yeah, I think how this relates to the finding rewilding healing is obviously like the two things can be true obviously references that video that I made about, you know, Carrie kind of having this like duality in her energy, this kind of like real mix of like masculine and feminine. But yeah, I think in our connection, I obviously like respect her masculine with masculine energy without needing her to be a man, and also without like discounting the fact that, you know, like she has feminine energy as well, and like I still call her, you know, pretty and all that sort of stuff, but then I also still call her like handsome and a king, you know what I'm saying? Like, and yeah, I also think like a big part of the healing in this song is just about her sitting in the perspective of like being able to allow duality in that connection, regardless of, you know, whether Olivia was doing the same thing or not. If Carrie was able to acknowledge that, you know, like where there was like pain and like loss and like grief, but also like honoring, you know, kind of the connection that they had. Like, I feel like that's kind of the vibe of two things can be true. It's kind of like, you know, what we had like meant something, but, you know, this new thing makes you happy. And, you know, I can, you know, like be happy for your happiness, without, yeah, like getting all tangled up in feelings. Like, for example, without getting insecure that you left me for a guy, or at least that might be my perception. Like, I don't know what happened. Obviously, I'm assuming this happened sometime in 2022 and I wasn't paying enough attention until, you know, I think all of this was already like done. So I don't know like what the situation was. But that's what it seems like based on Carrie's song. And so, yeah, like that's kind of like what I think the healing part of this song is. And I think potentially the thing that like initiated that healing was everything that went down when their friendship breakdown happened in August 2023. Because obviously, you know, like the painful part of that connection kind of changing from something situationshipy and casual into friendship that I'm assuming happened sometime in 2022 seemed to have like hurt Carrie based on her song. And that's when it seems like two things can be true was kind of like calling back to, like, obviously the verses are set in the present, but I think, you know, the choruses are set maybe like when the situationship ended. Yeah, I think in August when the shoe was on the other foot, when Carrie was now with someone else happy, like much happier, than, you know, Olivia could necessarily make her. Because, you know, not because I'm better than Olivia, but just because I'm better for Carrie. We're obviously meant to be together. yeah, like I think when the shoe was on the other foot, potentially that provided a lot of healing. And then Carrie was able to not take the situationship breaking down as personally anymore because, yeah, she could see how sometimes someone else is just better for that person, even if, you had a meaningful connection with that person originally. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, like the friendship breakdown in August when she had me, might have made all of that retroactively make more sense, and that might have provided a healing experience. And yeah, just helped to think that, like, yeah, obviously some people are just meant to be with other people, even if you do have a meaningful connection with someone else beforehand. So yeah, I imagine that the other part of the finding rewilding healing was that, yeah, like when the shoe was on the other foot, when she saw it from the other perspective, she was able to get it and then, yeah, maybe write the song from that, like, two things can be true kind of perspective. I think with the song Errors of Us, like I get why Carrie was like wanted to commemorate that kind of experience by writing a song about it. Because obviously I think the Eras Tour experience was very healing for her, especially when Taylor just happened to play the song Clean as one of the surprise songs, because that's like very much the vibe. But yeah, I think, something got lost in translation when Carrie actually wrote the song, because, to be honest, like I don't think Eras of Us captures the vibe that was like actually the vibe after the Eras Tour. And I don't know if it was because Carrie was maybe influenced by, like what people were posting online, and that maybe made her want to like put some more lovey vibes in the song than maybe what was necessarily there. Like I think, the vibe was more kind of like clean and letting go than anything else. But yeah, I think, people on the internet maybe wanted it to be different than what it was. And then, that might have influenced her to play into it, or, potentially just could be the same reason why, I think all of the Shannon songs are confusing. Like if you really go back and listen to this discography, like every single Shannon song is just like emotional whiplash, like one way than the other. It's kind of like, I love you, but I don't, you know what I'm saying? I love you, but I hate you. Like it's like very like flipping back and forth, like constantly, even in one song. And yeah, like, yeah, I think like as a muse, Shannon's just not that good of a muse for Carrie. And so, I think that could explain why the song sounds the way it sounds. It's kind of like confusing in terms of like, is it like the vibe's lovey or the vibe's not lovey? Because there's also lots of references to like adrenaline and feeling cut up and numb and all that sort of stuff. Like, the song's confusing, like, but all the Shannon songs are confusing. And I don't know if it's confusing because she was trying to give, the fans something that she thought they wanted. Or if, that's just the vibe with any Shannon song. Like every Shannon song is, yeah, very, like there's a lot of conflict. It's very confusing. And, I think that's just based on what that like connection was for her. It seems like she was really confused in that connection, couldn't figure out what she wanted. And like would kind of like get, yeah, confused. I think there's a reason why she's always referring to Shannon as like getting in her head. Yeah, I think, Shannon just was confusing. To be honest, like I think the Errors of Us healing like isn't giving healing because, maybe the healing is not finished yet. You know what I'm saying? Like I think, there might still be more there in terms of what needs to be healed from that connection. Yeah, like I think there's a reason why, like there's so many Finding Rewilding references in that song, and some of them Carrie obviously put in originally, but then also some of them, somehow I was able to access those energies and like say all that stuff, like on the internet before I knew the song existed. And I think that's because, when Carrie was writing the songs, when she was, potentially trying to reach for lovey things in order to close that connection, potentially there was nothing there for her to reach for in the direction that she was trying to reach for. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think she ended up reaching somewhere else to like access those kind of like lovey sentiments that ended up in the song. Because, the place that she was trying to reach for them in didn't actually have them. And so, yeah, like, I think that's why, the song, like, I think it was written with the intention of like having some sort of like, yeah, like nice closing to that connection. But I think, the lovey things that she was trying to say in that song wasn't coming from that place, and that's not really what she had to say. That's not the truth of what she had to say. And so, yeah, like I think the healing's incomplete. Like, I think Errors of Us is a bit of a anomaly, which makes sense why, you know, that's the only track that's got a whole different kind of branding and it's all black and white and grayscale. Like, I think, you know, that healing's very incomplete. Like, I don't think, you know, Carrie's necessarily stood in the truth of what needs to be stood into for that chapter to close properly. Like, I get trying to leave a chapter with like some loving sentiments. Like, I get, you know, trying to write that chorus for the sake of like trying to leave a chapter with some loving sentiments. But, you know, I think when there was that much like hurt and turmoil and like, you know, I think she was treated really, really, really shitty for, you know, trying to talk about how she feels and trying to do her job. Yeah, like I think sometimes like you're just not like, that's just not the vibe. Like that just isn't like, I don't know, like especially at the time, like I don't think I can't imagine that she would have at the time ended up with, you know, the closure that she maybe needed to be able to write that, to be able to leave it with kind of like, you know, the sentiments that are in the chorus. And I think that's why she ended up kind of reaching for our energy and pulling stuff out of, you know, somewhere else to like write the song. I can imagine that, you know, it probably would have taken a very sincere apology, a very sincere, like, you know, I never should have implied that you weren't empathetic. I never should have, you know, turned everything into a circus and used my own hurt as an excuse rather than, you know, use my hurt as an excuse for toxic behavior rather than dealing with my hurt in a healthy way and like engaging in the conversations that you tried to initiate with me, both before the song dropped and then also in the voice memo after. Like, you know, I think if she had got that, then maybe if she had been reaching for the, you know, lovey parts of the song that she wanted to put in there, she might have found it. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I just think, I think that whole situation still, you know, I feel like that healing, I don't know if it's been giving the healing that, you know, she was trying to write that song about. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, you know, the truth that she needs to align with in order to heal, like, I don't know if Errors of Us was it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think Errors of Us was giving the truth that she needed to align with in order to heal, because, you know, I think that's why the song sounds the way it sounds and why, you know, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to leave Errors of Us at that. Like, I just think the healing's incomplete. And yeah, I don't know if it was giving healing. I think it was an attempt. I don't know if it was giving what it needed to be giving. So for the song Attached to You, I think the song was like triggered by an event with me. But I think the song is also about, you know, times in the past where she's done something similar to what she did in the situation with me in terms of kind of like setting herself up for failure, like kind of like self-sabotaging so that, you know, she doesn't have to confront the vulnerability of like, you know, actually like being emotionally available to another human being. Yeah, like I think obviously I'm pretty sure the song was written from, you know, the perspective of like when I first dipped and she was like reflecting on like, you know, of course this is ending now because, you know, I didn't contribute to circumstances that would have like allowed this to like be what it should have been at the start. You know what I'm saying? Like she literally should have just messaged me and been like, you know, fuck the label way at the start, and like did not allow, like she should have not allowed them to use us as a marketing strategy. Like she should have said no and been like really adamant about that. And so, yeah, like I think while a situation with us like triggered her writing the song, and, you know, the situation with us was like the instigator of that song coming into existence, I think the song's more about, you know, all the times in the past where she did that. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't think I was the first. Like I think she's probably done that so many times where, you know, even though it wasn't kind of like as big and an official as, you know, the situation with her and I where she wasn't allowed to talk to me, like I think she's probably made herself unavailable in other ways to other people in the past. And I think that's what the song's really about. I think, the situation with me dipping triggered her writing the song. But I think there's at least one other muse on the song, other than me, that, she might have done something similar. And, while I think I, maybe triggered the song being written because, I think, me dipping maybe triggered her and made her realize all the times that, she'd been kind of not giving people a fucking chance. I think, she was relying on at least one other muse to fill out the song, so that, a little bit the muse could cover the parts of the song that was about me, but then also so that, I could heal the things from the past through awareness. I think her being aware in the situation with me of exactly what she was doing and what was happening, maybe made her get real with herself about times she'd done that in the past, and maybe made her heal the times in the past that where she'd done the same thing. And I think she was drawing on probably at least one other experience pretty heavily in order to fill out the song, and I have a feeling that the person that she's drawing from is the other Pisces that she's talked about a few times in interviews, that she's dated another Pisces other than Shannon. I would say that, that's who she's filling out this song with, because there's enough overlap with who I think the other muse is and me. But I think we do differ, me and that other muse, in one way. And that's that, I think I have way, way, way more feminine energy. And I think that's why in the attached to you visuals, the visual she uses is lots of black and white and then gold lights shooting through, because I think the reality was while she did the same thing to me as she did to the other person, and I think while we're maybe emotionally and intellectually very similar, I think I have way more feminine energy with that than the other muse on the song. And I think while I think she might regret the part of not being not being as emotionally available to that person as what she would like, for the sake of, she could have had a deeper emotional connection and intellectual connection with that person. At the same time, I think she's acknowledging that she still would have had to play the feminine energy in that connection, which is what she's using black and white to represent in a lot of her visuals. Whereas I am associated with gold because I allow her to be that kind of gold masculine energy in our connection. So I think the point of having the black and white and gold visuals in this song on the tour was to allude to the fact that there's two muses on this particular track. There's two muses that overlap enough that, the verses kind of make sense for both of them, in the sense of there's, I think, some intellectual and emotional similarity, but how we differ is in energy. And, I think one person is still in that kind of black and white realm, and, I'm in the gold energy. You know what I'm saying? I think, the point of the visuals was to allude to the fact that there's two muses on the song. And that, I think the kind of healing part of the song is that, the situation with me that was maybe a little bit more forced and a little bit more extreme, maybe made her get sick of her own shit and realize all the times that she's been doing this sort of stuff in the past, and brought these circumstances on herself in a way that maybe felt more voluntary at the time. But I think, the song is about, her getting sick of her own shit, and realizing, because she's in a more extreme example where, her hands were tied a little bit more and she was forced into it a little bit more, that, it's just so not the vibe. And, all those times that she was doing it, she was doing it from a place of pain, and it was just actually not serving her. It was actually not serving her in the sense of it was an excuse to not stand in love and to not stand in truth and to not stand in her desire to get to know people and get closer to people and be emotionally available to people. I think that's what kind of the healing of the song is. To be real with you, I think the song Crush is probably one of Carrie's strongest lyrically. I think the way she's written that song is so clever. Like I think she did such a good job of the lyricism of that song. And like I think this song is like the epitome of what to do when you have like that kind of like back forth energy, because I think the way she channeled that into this song, like it makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like I know I said that sometimes that makes for a confusing song, but when the point of the song is the juxtaposition, the contrast, the confusion that's created from having like a mix of like pleasure and pain on one song, and that's like the point of the song, I think it, I think she actually utilized that energy really well lyrically in this song, and the song makes so much more sense and paints such a clear picture of that kind of like contrast and confusion, and that like duality in kind of a relationship. It's more kind of like a feeling though, like the song's very not literal, in the sense of like like the sex isn't really about sex. The sex is a metaphor for like love and tenderness and pleasure. And the pain isn't really physical pain. Like it kind of sounds like self-harm, but it's more just, it's like, I think more representing like emotional pain. So it's like very metaphorical, the song. But yeah, like creates such a good contrast. And yeah, I think like is doing that more so metaphorically in terms of the feeling of toxic relationships, which, again, I think this muse, like I think there's one more obvious muse that like paints most of the song, but I think there's probably lots of like times that she's like felt this way in connections, because I think it's more about the feeling that's created in these kinds of toxic dynamics. And yeah, like I'm assuming she's had more than one toxic relationship before. And yeah, they're probably all feeding into this song in particular. And yeah, I think again, it's like not so much about the toxicity of the relationship, but the toxicity that she feels within herself. Like it's more about the feeling of toxicity, the feeling of like the push-pull, and yeah, the highs and lows. And yeah, you can go back and watch my initial reaction video to like unpack this song more and unpack it line by line, and go through like all the juxtapositions that she's making between kind of pleasure and pain, like the highs and the lows, like in terms of particularly the feeling that's created in these, kind of like unhealthy dynamics that we can get into with people sometimes. Because yeah, I think she captures it really well. And in the first reaction video, like I think I explained it as good as, I could explain it again. But yeah, I think like the way that the song Crush is like a healing song, is essentially, I think this song, technically I think like most of the second half of the album was all written around the same time, around the time that, like I dipped, and, I think that was triggering a lot of stuff from my past. Just assuming like based on the way the song sounds, and also assuming based on, like I was in a similar boat in terms of having heaps of my stuff from my past triggered in that kind of like altercation that we had in the Venus retrograde. Like we were definitely, I think, both going way back through like all of our past connections and all of our past pain in that time. And yeah, I think Attached to You, Crush, Pretending, Joyride, and Lead Me On were all written in that time, like kind of like July, August, September, finishing off with like Antidote at the end, after she'd had like this catharsis, writing the other songs that come before Antidote. Like I think the songs towards the end of the album, I think was the catharsis of, kind of like a combination of like awareness and like getting re-triggered, but this time being like aware of like what's going on, and then like not getting kind of lost in it, and then like being able to like find love and truth again, to stand back into love and truth again. And I think obviously the standing back in love and truth part will be more on the Finding Rewilding album. I'm expecting there to be some songs kind of contrasting the last half of the album, that's obviously more about her being triggered and like not standing in love and truth, like getting into like moments of like, being triggered, stepping out of love and truth, stepping into, lots of other feelings depending on the song. And yeah, I think when the Finding Rewilding album drops, I'm expecting some songs to be written that were happening at the same time, where she was finding a way to step back into love and truth in these moments that were really difficult, and she was getting triggered by, stuff that was going on with us. There was obviously aggravating wounds that hadn't been healed from her past. And with the song Crush, I can kind of imagine that it might have been written in the time where, I'd kind of first dipped. And yeah, I think, Carrie was potentially having flashbacks of like, in past connections where, people that she'd really loved and cared about had like, dipped as well. Like I think, me dipping because of the circumstance, like it didn't have really anything to do with her, but it had to do with the circumstances and what that was triggering in me. Yeah, like I dipped for those reasons. And then I think, Carrie was potentially triggered by that, understandably so. And yeah, I think that's the place that she possibly wrote all these songs in. And, this was like really hard as well. And like why it took me so long of like going back and forth about whether or not to stay in the situation after I realized kind of after March that, it wasn't going to be over in March the way that I initially thought. Yeah, like I went backwards and forwards all the time because I knew that if I did remove myself from the situation, it was going to be really, really hard for her based on, what I'd gathered about her past and, how she'd been in, that back and forth dynamic, like at least once, like publicly at least once. Like I knew publicly obviously I knew of at least one relationship that was, off and on. And I was like, obviously sitting here imagining that, the idea of something being off and on again would potentially be triggering. And so, yeah, like that was like such a difficult time because I was like felt so conflicted in terms of like feeling like I needed to do something for myself to take care of myself, but then also being worried about her. And ultimately I made the decision for me because I got to kind of like a pinch where, I kind of couldn't not choose me in that moment and what I needed in the situation. But yeah, like, I don't know, like I just think that was a tricky time for both of us. And yeah, I can imagine that, when all that was going down during Venus retrograde last year, yeah, I can imagine that, probably all those like patterns from the past, the on again, off again relationships that she'd been in before, like, yeah, potentially all the wounds that those left came flooding back. And, this is the way that I think Crush is a really healing song because I think, obviously that the song, it like has the most references to Shannon and she's like the strongest muse on there because I think their dynamic was like maybe the most shadowy, but like I wouldn't say the New York situation was a hell of a lot better, even though it's like maybe more open, the darkness that existed in that connection rather than shadowy and hidden and underneath things. And unfortunately, the only thing you can do when you're in like a moment of healing is like feel your feelings. You know what I'm saying? Like, unfortunately, I think the only option for her at that time was just to feel her feelings and feel like, the weight of like what that feels like to, experience that kind of like, like core wound again. That, I think had come from, her kind of like serious relationships from her past. Like they had definitely, that was kind of the vibe. And so, yeah, like I think, obviously the situation kind of like created the circumstances for that pain to be re-triggered, which, like that was definitely happening for me at the same time. Like the circumstances are recreating pains from my past that were getting re-triggered and I was having to sit with a lot and feel a lot and just be like aware of like my own patterns and like where I'd experienced things in the past that I maybe hadn't felt all the way through in order to heal it. I'd kind of like felt a little bit, but then it was too painful. And then I'd, kind of like shut down or whatever it was, or was, like in denial or whatever it was. And I'm sure it was the same for her. Like, I think, in the situation, I think the situation definitely triggered some pain from her past and it all came back up, and asked to be like felt, like feeling the feeling of that duality, that like, pleasure and pain that, is an inherent part of love. Like to love someone is to open yourself up to pain. And that's what I think that kind of healing part of the song is kind of about. It's about like really feeling all of those feelings and being aware of like that duality of the two feelings coexisting. and, you know, kind of the tension that those two feelings create, and kind of the like toxicity that those feelings create, and, you know, where that like has her being willing to sit in that has harmed her in the past, where she's I think maybe stayed for the pleasure and tried to ignore the pain in a situation that's like clearly not good for her. Like, you know, I think that's kind of what the song's about, particularly like the like end of the song talking about, you know, part of her like wants to like stay in the connection and stay in that like this could be a forever thing, but part of her knows better. Like, I think, you know, kind of that's where the song ends up. Like, I think Crush is healing in the sense of like, you know, sitting with all those difficult feelings in connections that were clearly not meant to last. And yeah, where she kind of like opened herself up to harm by staying in them for the sake of the little bit of pleasure and ignoring how much like pain and suffering those relationships were creating for her. And I think that's why Crush appears in this order. Like, I think this is why Crush appears after Attached to You on the album, because I think obviously Attached to You was written right as I was dipping, and then I think Crush was written immediately after, because, you know, obviously I think both of us, like, our first reaction to that situation was just to be absolutely crushed, particularly given that, you know, like neither of us like wanted to be in the circumstances we were in, and, you know, like some outside entity had created this circumstance for both of us, and created the situation where we could not speak to each other, and therefore like all the hurt and things that were coming up in our connection were going unrepaired, not through our own choosing, you know, through the choosing of an outside entity. And, you know, I think we're both getting to the point where, well, at least I was getting to the point where I was like, I think no matter how energetically aligned two people are, I don't know if anyone, like even the most energetically aligned pair in the world, I don't think anyone could survive these circumstances, because the actual circumstances we're in were so toxic and unhealthy. And so, yeah, like I think we're both in a place of just feeling so crushed by that reality. And, you know, I think that's kind of how the song ended up being what it ended up being, because, yeah, I think Carrie went into the studio fully intending to write a song about just being so crushed by the circumstances. And I think the inspiration was the line that I added to the description box of my Crash playlist, which was I'd rather be angry than crushed, because obviously I was so crushed at the time, but a lot of what was coming out was like anger towards the label for, you know, allowing the situation to exist, that was, you know, causing us both to be crushed. And yeah, I think that's how the song kind of like ended up where it ended up. Like, I think she went into the studio intending to write about how crushed she was. But then, you know, I think kind of the toxicity that we were both potentially really angry about, that was being channeled towards a label for creating the circumstances we're in, ended up, like maybe swaying the song towards, you know, other toxic situations she'd been in the past that had caused a lot of pain. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that, you know, the circumstances that we've been thrown into have created such an opportunity for healing, in the sense of like, you know, they've mirrored so many pains from both of our pasts, that have created, you know, such an intense opportunity for healing. And, you know, that's not as an excuse for us to be in this situation. I don't think we should be in this situation, because I think we would be doing this work regardless. I do think that maybe it would have taken at least 4 years to do the amount of work that we've done in 2, just based on the intensity of the experience, the intensity of like all the triggering. But yeah, like by no means is like us like utilizing the situation we're in to heal, you know, an excuse for us being in the situation. You know, I think the connection by nature is very healing, and I think we would have been doing this work outside of the situation regardless. But yeah, like I do think at the same time, like the circumstances of this situation have created such a mirror of like so much past pain that, you know, needed to be healed. And yeah, like have definitely provided a container for doing that. Definitely not an ethical container, but, you know, a container nonetheless. Yeah, like while I'm not sure exactly like how this song came to be, that's how I imagine it would have come to be, like just based on kind of like what we were going through at the time. yeah, like I definitely think, you know, us both being angry at Capital at the time, like obviously Carrie was angry enough to quit, and I was angry enough to quit the situation, to remove myself from the situation. You know, I think that was like a real kick up the butt for both of us to just be like, yeah, all this toxic bullshit like that we've allowed in the past is just like so not the vibe. And yeah, I think that's how Crush, like I think that's how Carrie might have ended up going into the studio to write a song about being crushed, and then ended up being like writing a song about, you know, all of these toxic relationships that she's been she's been in in the past that have, yeah, definitely not served her and definitely caused her a lot of pain. You know, I think like her relationship with her label, you know, was also very crush coded. You know what I'm saying? You know, I'm sure it wasn't easy for her to quit, and, you know, let that go. And yeah, like I'm sure it was just as hard to like let all of the toxic relationships in her past go. And yeah, like that's just how I imagine this song came to be, just like based on kind of where we were at and like what was happening, and, you know, kind of where the song very clearly ended up. So yeah, I think the healing of Crush is multi-layered. Like obviously there was a lot going on in the background. Like I think on a surface level, you know, obviously she kind of describes me as the antidote to the highs and lows that, you know, are kind of associated with this song. Like this is the main song about highs and lows on the album. And that's what Antidote's calling back to when she sings about me being the antidote to the highs and lows. Yeah, I think, you know, there's definitely obviously an element of like being the antidote to unhealthy situations from the past, but then I think there's also an element of like being the antidote to the circumstances that led to that song even being written. You know what I'm saying? For her to even need to be in that pain place to write that song, which was, you know, the fact that, you know, I think she probably wanted to quit her job for a long time based on the song doing better. And, you know, like these circumstances maybe allowed that to come into fruition, like maybe gave her permission for that to come into fruition. So yeah, the healing on Crush is like definitely very multi-layered. And to be real with you, like I know the album kind of like sets up this premise of like, you know, I'm the antidote, like I'm the one providing the healing, but really like Carrie provided that healing for herself because, you know, in that moment where we were having a hard time and it would have been really easy for her to like fall back into old patterns that she'd been in her past relationships, where she went into that kind of like masochism, where she went into that kind of like self-harm kind of like energy. Like she chose not to, you know what I'm saying? Like that, I think, is the real healing, that, you know, she made a different choice in that moment. And, you know, I think this is like really what healing relationships are all about. It's about, you know, the love and container of that relationship, providing enough like kind of love and safety to make better choices for yourself, that the love's different. So that inspires you to make better choices for yourself. I think when you're in a connection where like your ego is like way more out of control and like you're coming from like a more shadowy place and like, you know, like the love's not the same. Like I think it's just so easy to make bad choices for yourself that like, yeah, perpetuates your own pain. But yeah, I think kind of how you know a healing connection is the energy. The energy is just different and you can make better choices for yourself. And I think that's really the healing in the album, is like less about me. Like I know Antidote kind of leads you to believe that it's about me, but really I think it's just this connection. The context of this connection provides a better container for Carrie to make more healing choices for herself. And, you know, I think that's the way that like, you know, the healing really happens through the In Search of the Antidote album. It's more coming from within. The call's coming from within the house, from inside the house. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of more the vibe. But like for the context of the art, which is what I'm talking about the art. Like the art is, you know, supposed to set you up to believe that it was me. Really, it was Carrie. And yeah. But yeah, for the purposes of like the art, like analyzing the art, which is what this video is supposed to be about, like, yeah, it's like the Antidote kind of like brings that song full circle. But yeah, really just for like personal reasons, just know that really was Carrie. Like Carrie provided that healing for herself at the end of the day. I think the song Pretending comes next on the track list because, yeah, I think after that moment where, you know, we were both, like it was not looking super good for either of us, and we're both like maybe coming from that kind of like crushed place of like, you know, maybe not believing that it was going to work out. You know, I think I think Carrie got her like spirits back a little bit faster than I did. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was kind of the seed that started the song Pretending. So obviously the song's about, you seeing potential with someone that they don't necessarily see. And that was definitely the vibe at the time. Like after I'd kind of like, been in that kind of a little bit of no hope situation. I think she came out of the no hope situation, was like, no, we're going to end up together. Like, don't pretend that we're not going to end up together. Like that was kind of the vibe. But yeah, I don't think that this song is specifically written about me. Like I think, in that moment where she was feeling a feeling of like kind of frustration that she was seeing it and I wasn't, I think what she ended up doing with that feeling is like going back to other times in her past where she was feeling frustrated that she was seeing something with someone that they weren't necessarily seeing. And, like in the context of our situation, obviously she could not say anything to me. She could not just say, hey, I see a future with you, still, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think there was so many times in the past where she'd been in the exact same situation with someone else where she was seeing something that they weren't seeing and she didn't say anything. And I think that's how the song Pretending provides healing on the album because, obviously in our circumstance, she was not telling me that she saw a future with me, like involuntarily, like that was not her choice to like not be able to make that decision. But yeah, I think in the past, she's chosen to like do that. And again, like in a similar way that a lot of the other songs are set up where, she's kind of put in a position where she like has to do something that she's done voluntarily in the past. Like I think in the context of like being forced into that decision, the decision looks a little bit different. It looks a little bit more silly. It looks, like more like, kind of like not standing in love and truth in like opportunities. You know what I'm saying? Like I think the song Pretending potentially made her look back at past like times where she'd seen a future with someone and thought, yeah, I was really not standing in love and truth when I didn't share those things with that person, when I just stood there and like felt all these feelings and like saw the vision but like didn't say a fucking word. Like I think when you're in a circumstance where you're being forced to not say anything, that'll make all the other times in the past look a lot different. And as far as like who I think the other muse is that's like obviously filling out the song, because, like while I think I was like the genesis of the song, like I was kind of like the seed that started the song, like I think mostly she was probably relying on like a different muse to fill out most of the song, I think. Most of these songs she's kind of like flashing back in time. Like I think these songs are like starting with me, but kind of like telling a story about, a time from her past where, she's been in the same situation. So that, yeah, kind of like touch the song in a way to like mark it in the sense of like, I've provided healing for that experience. But yeah, like I think all the songs on the In Search of the Antidote album until Antidote pretty much, like I think they're more about her past than anything else. And I really thought that was the case with this song, like all the way back to like my very first reaction video to the album dropping, part 2 in this mini series, where I did say that I thought, the other muse that she was like intertwining into the song was Kelsea Ballerini. And to be honest, like I still am leaning towards Kelsea Ballerini being the muse that's kind of helping fill out the story in this song that, like I think started with me, but I think, the story in the song is potentially more about a situation from her past. And the main reason, like why I'm still leaning towards Kelsea Ballerini is that, obviously like there's a scene in the song about, someone dropping her off. And, that reminds me of, the story she tells around the song Better Version, where she talks about going song for song in Kelsey's Jeep and showing each other's albums before Girl of My Dreams dropped. And so, yeah, that kind of like cast my mind back to that story, like the car scene. And then also the song's called Pretending. And in the song Better Version, one of the lines in Kelsey's verse is that, your next girl's going to get you not pretending. So like, to me, that makes sense. Like it feels like the song has specific callbacks to Kelsey. But the thing that is hard about the Kelsea Ballerini situation is that she's obviously being used as like a kind of cover for certain songs. And I'm like, not sure if, I'm supposed to think that the song's about her because it's like a fake cover, or if that song's actually about her. You know what I'm saying? Like it's such a fine line of like, is she putting in these clues again to mislead people into thinking the song's about Kelsea Ballerini when it's not? Or is this song actually about Kelsea Ballerini? The thing that's tipping me into thinking that Kelsea might be the main kind of story muse in this track, even though like she's been used multiple other times on the album as like a cover and, you know, the songs aren't actually about her, is, you know, I'm coming back to like what my vibe was when I first reacted to the album dropping and I first heard this song. Like I was leaning to Kelsea immediately because it's track 9 and I can't imagine who else Carrie would possibly call like a 9 person given like all the numerology lore. You know, like I definitely think Kelsey's her friend soulmate, and I can definitely see how, you know, kind of delusional Pisces seeing like a Virgo, which is, you know, the sister sign of Pisces, and, you know, like just makes such a good kind of like object for projections and delusions. To be honest, like a Pisces will fantasize about a Virgo all day long. And a Virgo will try and save a Pisces all day long. You know what I'm saying? Like those two go together so well. And so, yeah, like I can imagine that, yeah, she potentially could have like fantasized a relationship, like a romantic relationship first, even though they ended up being friends. And I think her vibe of like, we're going to stay in each other's life forever was right. It was just in a different capacity than her kind of like delusional Pisces ass might have initially assumed. The other thing that's kind of tipping me towards Kelsea is like, obviously kind of like the level of physical intimacy that this song kind of talks about is like, only kind of going so far as kissing. And, you know, I definitely think they kissed at least one time. Like I just, you know, like if you've watched the reaction to the In Search of the Antidote album, if you watch part 2, like I explain why I think they definitely kissed at least once. But yeah, like, I don't know. I don't get the vibe that, you know, the vibe would have been more than that. You know what I'm saying? Especially if the song's supposed to be about, you know, seeing something with someone that, you know, you initially mistake as like a romantic thing, but then it turns out to be just like a forever friend. Like, yeah, I think like Kelsea makes the most sense because while I definitely think they kissed at least one time, yeah, I just don't think like the vibe ever would have been more than that. Like, I think they were just like so clearly meant to be friends. And, you know, that's kind of the vibe of this album, like this song. Like, I think you could definitely interpret the song as like, yeah, like having like a friendly undercurrent. And like the music video too, like the muse was called like The Roommate. And, you know, lots of people like made jokes about Carrie and Kelsea like being roommates. And, you know, like that's also the vibe. Like they're so friendly that, you know, like I don't think people would immediately think, you know, like I think a lot of people would just assume they were roommates. You know what I'm saying? Like the sexual vibe, like personally, I don't see it. And so, you know, like I think Kelsea makes the most sense. I obviously like don't want to like wholeheartedly believe like something like that when, you know, Carrie's used her as like a cover muse a couple of times on the album. But, you know, like I can't see it being about someone else. So at this stage, I really think the song Pretending is about Kelsea. But yeah, I do think that, you know, the song's actually more about times in the past where she's not stood in truth and love and like actually told people how she felt, and told people that she saw them, you know, kind of forever and in her future when, you know, particularly in the case of like when our situation was going down and she couldn't say it. Like I think, you know, that maybe made her cast her mind back to all the time she didn't say it when she had the opportunity, now that she was in a situation where she couldn't say it even though she wanted to. To be honest, like I don't think the muse really matters because, you know, the point of the song I think is just like, you know, having regrets about not saying you know, how you feel about someone in the moment, and then kind of like sitting in that ambiguity of like having to sit with that feeling of like, will it be us? You know what I'm saying? Because you didn't express yourself and find out where that other person was at. And yeah, like I think that was just like very much the vibe of like where we were at in this kind of like timeline that this album's kind of painting a picture of. Yeah, I can imagine she was kind of sitting in the same feeling of like, you know, I still see the future with us, do you, kind of thing? Because obviously I was like not messaging her at all, like after I dipped, like for a personal boundary for myself, like I was not contacting her because, you know, that was like too triggering and too much for me. And like, yeah, it was giving me the ick. Like if I reached out, like that was like going to make me feel worse about myself. So I was just like not doing that until I got the things that I needed to get. I needed to hear like that she was sorry and how she felt about me. And so, yeah, she would have been sitting in that same feeling of like, yeah, is it going to be us? And, you know, like literally all she needed to do to find out about that was literally tell me how she felt. So it was kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like the situation with us was like so similar to like situations in her past of like, I really needed to hear how she felt about me. And until I did, like I had a personal boundary of just like, I'm not going to contact you. Not that I like said that, I just like made that personal boundary for myself and just like stuck to it. So yeah, like I think the situation we were in was very much mirroring the vibe of the song and like, yeah, kind of like where it seems like she might have been at the time, like in that kind of like crossroads of like, I see it, do I say something? Particularly given that it seems like in the past that she'd opted for no. So yeah, I think regardless of the muse, the song's very much about sitting in that ambiguity of like not knowing because, you know, you're not being brave enough to take that step into like truth and love and like putting your heart on the line. And yeah, I think that's like the point of the song is like that kind of like, yeah, feeling on the edge of that, feeling on the edge of, you know, wanting to step into truth and love and put your heart on the line, but also like, you know, a little bit wanting to sit in the comfortability of ambiguity where you can fantasize all these things in your head, and you never have to like face the reality of like whether that's going to come into fruition or not, whether it's always going to be a fantasy or whether it's going to actually turn into reality. And, you know, I think sometimes with delusional Pisces, sometimes they prefer to like sit in the fantasy and not find out if their fantasies could actually turn into reality. And that's why they need Virgos, because Virgos want to know what the reality of shit is. You know, I think that could possibly be why that, you know, the line from Pretending that Carrie used in promo for the Antidote album was the only line that didn't get its own post on her Instagram story with coordinates, because, you know, I'm expecting her to drop that when she's getting on a plane to come get me or to come see me, to come find me. And yeah, like I think, you know, it would be kind of poetic for her to, you know, take the leap of like making that fantasy a reality, and marking it by, releasing a line from the song that's about, you know, sitting in the fantasy rather than the reality. Like, I think that's nice and poetic, and I can definitely see her doing that. 'Cause, you know, she's a Pisces and they do be doing artistic shit. So yeah, like that makes the most sense to me in terms of the song Pretending. Like that's what I think, that's who I think the muse is. That's what I think, you know, the story's flashing back to. That's how I think it like relates to us and relates to healing. And that's how I think she's kind of like using the song for promo, and, you know, how everything will eventually come out with Finding Rewilding. Like I think, you know, there's a reason why she's saving this quote for last. So I think the song Joyride technically has 3 muses. Obviously in the original reaction video, I clocked that there was a muse change between the first and second verse. And, you know, upon further listening, I realized that the first verse references the number 6 and the second verse references the number 9 twice. And if you're not familiar, there's this whole 369 lore in our connection, which I'll insert a video of me explaining now so that you're totally across the lore, because it's super relevant in talking about, you know, what I think this song is actually about now with 2020 hindsight. So for anyone not familiar, the 369 combo is considered exceptionally powerful in numerology. And back in July, I went on a massive rant in Carrie's DMs about the significance of 3, 6, and 9 in relationships. But I literally yapped for almost 13 minutes, so I'm just going to play you a teeny tiny clip and then summarize what I said to her. I've always had the opinion that we have 3 relationships. Like we have we have 3s, we have 6s, and we have 9s. We have those 3 kinds of relationships. Essentially what I went on to say is that relationships can be divided into 3s, 6s, and 9s based on what those numbers represent in numerology. Our 3 relationships, which we tend to have more of early on, are essentially karmic in nature, where we convert our childhood karma into relationship karma. Our 6 relationships are often shadow mates and twin flames, because 6 in numerology is often associated both with the devil but also forms of beauty. such as having a mirror held up to you to show you all of your wounds in order for you to heal them. So often it's our 6 relationships that wake us up. Our 9 relationships are our soulmates because it's a number associated with completion and healing. Essentially, the 6 and 9 relationships mirror each other similarly to the way that actual numbers mirror each other, in the sense that the 6 relationships are designed for spiritual awakening, and as a consequence, you experience romantic love, whereas the 9 relationships are designed for romantic love, and as a consequence, you experience spiritual enlightenment. And some people will experience a 3-stage, a 6-stage, and a 9-stage in a single relationship, whereas other people will need to be in relationships with at least 3 separate people in order to experience a 3 relationship, a 6 relationship, and a 9 relationship. And in that voice memo, I spoke to Carrie about feeling like I was her 9.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you have 9 tattooed to yourself, because I think that would have called me in as well if I'm your 9, which I think I am.
Now with 2020 hindsight, I think the song Joyride is foreshadowing the journey that Carrie and I have been on for the last 2 years that we have been connected. And I think she's talking about some relationships in her past that like maybe prepared her for that journey. Because obviously I clocked that the first verse in Joyride seemed to be about Shannon, given that in the first verse it seems to reference the time that they were making the sex tapes videos, particularly the bitter video in the first verse seems to reference that by referring to, peaches and peanut butter and, things being put in mouths, which is, the whole concept of the bitter music video. And obviously the reference to sex, I think, brings kind of the sex tapes to mind. And then obviously she snuck a 6 reference into the verse as well. And I think, that was less about, making the verse sound like they were fucking for a long time, and more about specifically referencing the number 6 so that everyone clocks this verse as being about the 6 muse, which, in this case is Shannon, who's her shadow mate and I would say false twin. And then I think the second verse references 9 twice, but without referring to 9 as explicitly the way she referred to 6 explicitly as the number 6. I think she used 45, 4 plus 5 is 9, and 9T to indicate that the second verse is potentially about 2 muses that she thought were soulmates and thought were forever people, but turned out not to be. They were kind of like a flavor of soulmatey, but not quite the thing. And I think those people are potentially Olivia and Kelsey. I think she used these 3 muses specifically because each of these 3 people from her past possess something specifically that I have, that was the thing that she fell in love with them for, that I have. You know what I'm saying? I kind of feel like there's, something from each of those people that I think I possess. And, those are the 3 things, or 3 of the many things that I think attracted Carrie to me, and then also made her know me when she found me, because I was, a combination of all of the things that she'd fell in love with other people. And even those people, and, each of those people didn't have overlap. I think, Shannon's very different from Olivia, Olivia's very different from Kelsey, and Kelsey's very different from Shannon. But yeah, I think the song's supposed to be about how her favorite things from each of those people are in me, somehow the best parts, or the parts that she was most attracted to in them foreshadowed, what I would be like when she met me. I think she liked the way Shannon mirrored stuff to her. Those two are definitely very opposite and mirror a lot of stuff back and forth from each other. And they think different. I think it's a little bit of opposites attract kind of situation. And, I think that's something Carrie and I definitely have. We have that kind of mirroring. We have that opposites attract kind of energy. And yeah, there's ways that, Shannon and I think similarly, because I think she's coming from, a more feminine energy. And I think Carrie's coming from a more masculine energy. And I think that creates a good kind of polarity and mirror. And then I think the more sexual parts of the second verse, I have a feeling they're Olivia coded, and obviously Carrie and I have a lot of really good sexual chemistry. And then I think the Kelsey parts, the more emotional connection and seeing eye to eye on things and like, you know, kind of being on the same vibe, same level, and same like kind of like mental wavelength. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there are pieces of all those people. There's pieces of me in all those people. Like, I think parts of the reasons why she fell in love with all those people before me, for like to different depths, and yeah, like in different ways, like I think was foreshadowing what she was looking for, hence the kind of like reference to like I was made to find you. Like, I think she was already finding like pieces of me in all these people before we connected. And the other thing that this song foreshadows is the journey from being each other's 6 to 9, which, you know, I obviously talked about in that numerology video. I talked about, you know, sometimes you meet someone and they're like one of those stages. They might be a 3, they might be a 6, or they might be a 9. And sometimes you meet someone and you evolve through all 3 stages. And sometimes you meet someone and you'll evolve through, you know, 2. And I think that Carrie and I met each other as each other's 6, as each other's twin flame, hence, you know, this separation. Like, I think this separation is like divinely guided. As much as I like have fucking hated the situation, like I do think it's, you know, very much giving twin flame separation. And then, yeah, I think, you know, while we've been in this period of separation, I think we've been evolving to be each other's 9, to be each other's kind of like healing soulmate, like the person that we'll get to spend forever with, because, you know, in my opinion, that's the difference between the twin flames that end up together and the twin flames that don't. It's the ones that, you know, can evolve together into that kind of 9 relationship. And if they don't, like, you know, maybe they were a false twin, maybe they were like a more of a shadow mate kind of vibe. Maybe not, like, who's to say? But yeah, like, that's my opinion now. Like, having been through this experience, like, at some point I kind of like woke up and realized that that's what was happening. And I think Carrie probably realized that before I did, based on, you know, her writing this song. It seems like she knew that we were like twin flames becoming each other's kind of soulmate and working from the twin flame separation into union, into like a more like soulmatey kind of like healing era, a union at the end when we become each other's 9s. Like, I don't think we met each other as each other's 9s. I think we became it throughout this journey that we've been in, throughout this, like, you know, 2 years that we've been separated. And obviously I think the journey from being each other's 6 to 9 kind of implies like a lot of healing in itself. But also I think, you know, in regards to this particular song, I think, you know, the healing that she's talking about specifically is obviously feeling like these girls were out of her league, which, you know, like does possess a little bit of a problem, given that, you know, there was like something specific about these 3 girls that she liked. And then she meets someone that has all of those things in one. Like, she doesn't have to choose between one. She doesn't have to settle for like one over the other. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can assume, like, at some point in this journey, she was like maybe feeling a little bit insecure about that, and then broke up those, you know, that into these 3 muses to talk about them instead. Like, that's kind of the vibe. That's what it's giving. Yeah, I think, you know, potentially there was like, you know, some time of insecurity when it came to our connection. And yeah, she like really had to, face her tendency to, maybe put other people on pedestals and think that they're out of her league when like they're not. I do kind of hope like the healing that she landed on, obviously I don't know for sure if this is where she got to, but I hope that, like where she got to was, like I was made to find her, because, you know, I was finding pieces of her and all these people that I met beforehand. So yeah, like I hope that provided healing. It's hard to say though. I'll have to ask her what she thought the like healing of Joyride was. The other thing is, you know, I think she's referencing like joyrides and cars, like doing 90 and a 45 specifically because, you know, we have a lot of car lore. And, you know, I'm expecting her to want to reference that at some point on the Finding Rewilding album. And so I think Joyride's kind of like maybe foreshadowing that as well. Foreshadowing like whatever song I think she'd already written about me on the Finding Rewilding album that's going to have a lot of car lore in it. Like, I really think this song is a bit of a setup in terms of, like something that she's written about on the Finding Rewilding album. Like, I think it's a bit of an attempt at foreshadowing, I would hazard a guess. So yeah, I think that's why she specifically tied all of this kind of like, 6 to 9 kind of journey to the car law as well, because like cars obviously represent like journeys and like moving forward and things like that. Like I think it's all relevant, it's all tied, it's all connected. And yeah, I'm expecting the plot to kind of like unravel on the Finding Rewilding album. Like I think it's like a good precursor. Exactly what it's a precursor for, I'm not sure. I just have a feeling that it's gonna, the story's not over with the car law. I think in terms of the chronological story, Pretending probably came after Joyride. Like I'm assuming she had that kind of like moment of like feeling insecure at some point in our connection, of feeling like I was out of her league. And then, having to kind of like sit with all the times that she felt out of her league with, Shannon, Olivia and Kelsey, among others, I'm sure. And, having to sit with, that like fear that, she's crazy. And, probably having experienced that in those connections as well, which, like I think she does make a lot of sense. Like when like what the kind of like crux of like what's going on in there is, like everything she says and does makes so much sense. Maybe not in the moment, but when you sit with it for a minute, like, everything she does seems completely sane to me. So, but yeah, like I can imagine that, when we were in that period of intense separation, when I was completely not reaching out to her, I can imagine, she probably spent some time insecure. But yeah, I imagine that, she eventually got to the pretending place, like got to the place of like, no, I still see the vision. And yeah, I think, probably they would have been flipped had they been in, chronological order of like when those triggers inspired those particular songs. But yeah, I think it was important that Pretending was track 9. And so I think that's the reason why, they're ordered this way. I think Joyride technically would be before Pretending, but yeah, like I think in terms of the chronological story, those two probably happened pretty close together, of like kind of feeling like, maybe I was out of her league. But then, based on what the song Joyride's about, it kind of like seems to get to the point of like, she fell in love with these pieces of all these people for a reason, and, meeting someone that just happened to have all of those pieces in the one place, like, obviously I'm meant for her, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's kind of the vibe of Joyride. So to me, it makes sense how she got from Joyride to Pretending. Like, they would make sense to go from, like, that chronological order makes sense to me. Like, that seems to paint a very clear picture of kind of like how she got through that, like, really difficult time we had during Venus retrograde. And so, yeah, I think basically where we are in the story is the, like, point of Pretending still. Then I think the last song in chronological order is Lead Me On, because obviously I think Lead Me On was written in the time where I first started kind of like posting about her more. And, like, I think at that point she would have, maybe been assuming that I was on the same vibe as her. I was seeing the vision, and that, I was seeing that we might end up together. And like maybe the reason why I was posting what I was posting was because, I was seeing it too. So yeah, I think Lead Me On comes chronologically after Pretending, but before Antidote. I think the song Lead Me On is the song that's most connected to Carrie's wounded inner child. And when she was talking in all the interviews about In Search of the Antidote, and when she was talking about, going back through her past and like healing lots of stuff last year and having to go all the way back to childhood, like I think the song that goes the furthest back is Lead Me On. I think it's the most accurate reflection of her relationship to feminine energy that was established through her first relationship to feminine energy, so through her relationship to her mother. And, I think her mother and I also are very similar. I think basically I'm a combination of like bits of her mum and bits of, all the girls that she's loved before. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's really how I'm perceiving myself in this situation. Like, I definitely see some similarity with, her mum and similarity with the girls that she's loved in the past. And yeah, like when I heard the song Lead Me On, even though I didn't have a great reaction to it initially, eventually I got to a place of like really understanding that she was coming from like a wounded inner child place. And I could see like how, I was mirroring stuff that, she kind of like comes to the relationship with the feminine with. Like, I think she perceives the feminine as much more distant and hard to like attain, and like maybe less available than what she would like. Yeah, like I'm not gonna lie, I think Carrie just like loves feminine energy like so much. Like I've never met someone who loves feminine energy more. Like I'm not gonna lie, like she like eats it up. You know what I'm saying? And you know, I just think like it would be so impossible for anyone to meet the kind of desire that she has for feminine energy. Like, you know, and so I understand why she perceives the feminine as more distant and unavailable to her than what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like I get why she perceives it that way, because, you know, what she wants from the feminine is so much, like she's like so full of desire. Yeah, that she just like wants a lot. And, you know, like I'm sitting here half the time and I'm like, you know, I'm a person and I can't possibly meet the demand. You know what I'm saying? Like demand is really fucking high. And so, yeah, like, yeah, I think she's just like, just very thirsty for feminine energy. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it's a little bit of like perception versus like just personality. You know what I'm saying? Like she's just very like, yeah, thirsty for feminine energy. And like, you know, I think she wants to a point that, you know, no one could possibly fulfill, at least not one person. And so, yeah, then when the demand isn't met, then she perceives the feminine as being more distant and unavailable to her as what she would like. I think that's the story she's telling herself, that the feminine's, you know, distant and unavailable and hard to reach. And yeah, like she's not good enough or whatever it is. Yeah, like I think she has a lot of stuff going on there that I obviously hear in the song Lead Me On. And yeah, I get like why she goes into like trying to contain and control feminine energy. Because it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever read the book. There's a book, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's about like these dudes that like live on this farm, and this one guy like finds this mouse and he loves the mouse so much that he like squeezes it to death. I'm like, that's kind of the vibe. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I feel like the mouse. I feel like Lenny's mouse. And I'm just like, I cannot possibly meet the demand. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, I understand where her perception of feminine energy comes from. But yeah, I feel that in the like vibe of Lead Me On. And I just feel that in her energy. Yeah, she's like the best because she fucking loves feminine energy, and that's so great. But yeah, the demand is high. Yeah, I think she's just like very thirsty for like feminine energy and feminine attention. And then also very sensitive, and also like has a bit of a tendency to perceive things as like maybe rejections or yeah, like I think she internalizes things to like mean that she's kind of like not good enough or not enough, particularly like when, you know, the demand can't be met. And sometimes that's just because I'm out of juice, girl. You know what I'm saying? Like I've got nothing left to give. And me not having anything to offer you has nothing to do with you not being good enough or not worthy or whatever it is. It's just, you know, I'm at my capacity and I'm a very limited human being. But yeah, I don't think she necessarily perceives the feminine as like flawed. Like I think she kind of puts the feminine on a pedestal and doesn't perceive the feminine as being flawed. And so then when something happens, she internalizes that it's her fault and that she's done something bad or that she's not good enough, when really it's because, you know, I just might not have enough left to give. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I feel like I really understand her relationship with the feminine in general and, you know, her relationship with her mother, because I think, you know, I'm probably a very good mirror to her mother. Like, I think just based on what I've gathered, like, I think probably a lot of the things that she likes about me are very similar to her mother. And then, you know, I think we also might have some similar flaws in terms of like, sometimes I can be a little bit distant, sometimes I can be a little bit critical. And it's because I'm concerned. Like, for example, when she wore a dress and I could see her like kicking her legs everywhere, like my first thought was like concern for her safety. And so I wanted to tell her like, be careful. And then I was like, that's probably going to come across as critical when, I'm definitely coming from a place of like love and concern for her. But I think the way that, I say things sometimes, it can come across as critical. And yeah, I think the way I communicate is probably similar to her mother. And, like, I think there's some, like, I just think there's some overlap there in some of the good ways and in some of the ways that, she's maybe had a hard time sometimes with the feminine at the same time. And so, yeah, I think Lead Me On is really kind of like cutting into that like core wound that she has with the feminine from like an inner child place. Like it's really cut into the core of it, like what it is. It's like, yeah, a lot of like wanting a lot of attention and perceiving the feminine as more distant than what the feminine actually is or is trying to be. And, like that's why my relationship with the song Lead Me On changed very quickly and why I really like the song now. Or why I really liked the song after it dropped, because, like after a few listens, I was like realizing just how vulnerable she was in that song and how like it was cutting right into that like wounded inner child that's just like so desperate to be like seen and heard and loved by the feminine. You know what I'm saying? Like that's really at the core of it. That's a lot of like what her issue with the feminine energy is that she's just looking for a lot of love. And yeah, like, I don't know, like she's just like the cutest little bean. You know what I'm saying? Like she's so sweet. She's so soft and sweet on the inside at that core. Like she acts so tough, but she's so not. Like she's not that tough. Like she can be a little bit tough, but she's really not that tough. She's just a little baby that wants to be loved. And yeah, so yeah, I think Lead Me On is definitely about the wounded inner child that's always perceiving the feminine as more distant and unavailable and critical maybe of her than maybe what the reality of the situation is. But then also I just don't think like the inner child is very good at giving parents grace and realizing that parents are flawed humans that don't have infinite capacity and can't meet like every single one of your needs. Like that's why the saying is it takes a village, because kids are fucking needy as fuck. And I think unfortunately in Carrie's case that she internalizes things as her fault when they're not your fault, babe. Like they're not your fault. Like it's not your fault that you want like so much love and attention. Like that's just the inner child. The inner child's always going to want so much love and attention. Like there's nothing wrong with that. You're not asking for too much. I think you're just asking a lot from one person. You need to spread out the love a little bit. Because like it's like too much demand for a single person. So yeah, like I find like I love the song Lead Me On in that sense, because I think it's a very real window into her soul, into the wounded inner child in particular. And yeah, like I think that song was healing in the sense of like, I think it was just like really vulnerable. Like I think it was probably the first time I've ever heard her, write from that place, from that wounded inner child place. Like I think it's the most vulnerable I've ever heard her in a song. I can imagine writing the song Lead Me On was very healing in the sense of like, I think it's the most vulnerable she's ever been on a track. Like it is so deeply vulnerable. Like it's just like seeing right through to that inner child that's like deep in the yearning and desire for like feminine, attention and energy and love and to be seen and heard. Like I don't think any other track in her discography like goes quite as into that energy as Lead Me On. Like I think Lead Me On really cuts into the crux of like what her relationship with the feminine is, particularly from that like wounded inner child place. And so I think writing such a deeply vulnerable track and just being so real about that yearning and desire would have been healing, just in the sense of like you're acknowledging it. And then also like I think it's also like maybe acknowledging what's at the core of like when there's other things coming up, such as all the other examples on the album. Like a lot of the time what's underneath that is an wounded inner child that's like looking for love and attention and like to be seen and heard from the feminine. And, you know, even in ways where, you know, like in the examples of like Joyride, where, you know, she's kind of not letting herself get locked down by people. I think that's, you know, coming from that, like, worried that she's not enough, worried that she's unworthy kind of place. Even if it looks like she's being a fuckboy, it's coming from a wounded inner child of like not feeling like enough. And yeah, like just, you know, wanting so much from the feminine. And, you know, I think that's why Carrie was using this song in particular to talk about how it has felt like it's been leading her towards, you know, her highest self. Because I do think sometimes, like, the better you are at connecting with your inner child, the better you are at connecting with your higher self. Because, yeah, I think whatever's aligned with your highest self is probably going to be aligned with your inner child, like kind of the core of who you are. Because that's like, just like a very, that's like you kind of like distilled down to your like most basic essence. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think, yeah, it makes so much sense to me why Lead Me On ended up becoming that track for her of like connecting her to her higher self. And yeah, I think it's just like a deeply, deeply vulnerable track. Like, I know it doesn't seem like much, like when you listen to it, but when you listen to it, like kind of understanding her and like, you know, yeah, like her wounded inner child, like you can just feel that energy all over the track. And so, yeah, I obviously really love the song, even though I didn't have that good of a reaction to it initially. Because, you know, like I was coming from my wounded inner child that was like looking to be seen and heard and validated from the masculine just as much as she's looking to be seen, heard and validated from the feminine. You know what I'm saying? Like, but yeah, like when I could put my stuff aside, which is just so much easier in the context of this connection. Like I think when you have a really good like energy and really good container with someone, like, you know, all your bullshit like really does not fucking matter. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so easy to put it aside. It's so easy to put your ego, your pride aside. Yeah, like I think the love is like so strong that that's like not like it's not never challenging, but like it's so much easier. And yeah, like yeah, I definitely was able to do that and connect with the song in a different way. And I'm so glad because, you know, like I think it's just yeah, like I think it's an underrated track just based on how much of a window into her soul it is. Like I love the song. I think it's so cute, and just yeah, like cuts to the core of like yeah, her desire to be seen and loved. She's just so cute. She's little cootie patootie. And yeah, anyway, I'm gonna keep rambling about Lead Me On if I don't shut up, because I could talk about this song all day, because I have so many thoughts. And I could talk about, you know, Carrie's wounded inner child all day, because I have so much love for that tiny little, like, baby girl. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for Lead Me On. And yeah, like, I feel like I spelled out, like, the healing associated with this song, like, good enough. So yeah, I'm going to leave Lead Me On there. I think the song Antidote comes way less out of the blue when you think of Lead Me On as its like precursor of like this getting to, you know, the core of her inner being, her wounded inner child and her highest self. Like that's really the essence of who she is. And that's, you know, where the song Lead Me On kind of takes her to. It like really takes her to, you know, like the essence of her being. Like it makes so much more sense, like how you get from there to Antidote, rather than, you know, if you just take all the songs as just like pain essentially. Like I think the leap from like there to Antidote feels like a lot. But when you think about it think about her going through her wounded inner child and highest self in the song Lead Me On, I think it makes a little bit more sense. Especially because like Lead Me On's the only song that's like really specifically about me. Like every other song kind of like goes through other experiences, whereas I think the Lead Me On song is the only one that's like really just the core of like, you know, her like issues with her and I, which is really just her core issues with the feminine. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I'm reflecting back to her core issues with the feminine energy. And yeah, like I think Lead Me On kind of distills it down to like so kind of like fundamental, so basic, that, you know, by the time you get to Antidote, I think it kind of makes more sense, like how this connection feels like the antidote to all the pain from the past. And it's not so much that, you know, like I'm necessarily doing anything, or that I'm, you know, whatever it is. Like, I don't even know what you would have to imagine that I am to be that. Like some sort of like mystical healer, maybe. I think what it really is like the container of this connection, like the energy of this connection that we share, like allows us both to go through, the core of our beings, like our inner selves and our wounded childs, and like see every part of ourselves. Like I think, like this container of this relationship just provides like such a different energy than I've ever experienced. And it's not because of me and it's not because of her, it's because of who we are together and how we are together and the energy of how we are together. Like it's deeply, deeply, deeply healing, like deeply golden, like deeply alchemized, like, it's like, I don't know, like it's fucking wild is what it is. Yeah, it's like, it feels like, like how certain chemical reactions like create certain like substances. Like I think who we are as a chemical reaction, like what our connection is as a chemical reaction to each other. It just feels like alchemy. Like that's what it feels like. It feels really golden. It feels very divine, very divinely guided. And, I think it allows us to do the work individually. You know what I'm saying? Like the container of the connection provides the safety to do the work, even when the work's fucking hard. Like this has been the fucking hardest work of my life. You know what I'm saying? Like this inner work has fucking kicked my butt. Like I've gone through like all of my deepest, darkest shadows, all of my deepest, darkest fears, all of my, like every single thing that I failed to feel for, my entire life, and, all the things that fucking built up. Like this experience has been fucking wild. And yeah, like I don't know how many times I can drop the F-bomb in a video, by the way. But anyway, it's, I feel like I need the words for emphasis. You know what I'm saying? Like it's actually out of this world, like the last 2 years has been, in terms of like inner work. And I know that I'm doing the work, but, like the container of this connection makes it so easy. And, I think that's the real point of Antidote, even though, it kind of sounds like the Antidote muse is like fixing things, actually carries fixing things for herself because of the container of the connection and the alchemy of the connection. And it's the same for me. Like, I feel like, I've like done the work because the container of this connection feels different. The energy is different. It allows me to access parts of myself that I've never accessed before. It allows me to get real with myself in ways that I've never gotten real with myself before. It allows me to like go through like feelings that, would have been too scary in the past. It just like, yeah, I think the connection has done a lot for me. I think the connection has done a lot for Carrie, and it's, not specifically because, each of us as individuals are like any sort of, superhuman whatever. It's that, our connection, the way that we're connected to each other, like there's something about it that's like, like can turn lead into gold. You know what I'm saying? Like can turn trash into treasure. Like that's the vibe. Like for the purposes of Carrie's art, I think it's a little bit potato. You know what I'm saying? Like I think, her kind of presenting the art in a way where it seems like the Antidote muse is like providing the antidote. I think her presenting it that way is just like a little bit better in terms of, the art. Like I think, that's what resonates with people. Because I do think we all have those experiences of like meeting someone and that person feeling like healing in some capacity. Like I think everyone we meet has the capacity to heal us in some regard. And yeah, like I don't think the song would have been as good if it was like, I go through all parts of myself to heal myself, and all parts of myself are available in this. I don't think that would have been as catchy a song. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Like, I think the art makes sense as art. But at the end of the day, like real life is obviously far, far, far more complicated than the art. But, I think Carrie did a really good job of distilling what's going on in our lives down to art at the same time, like especially given, those songs have so many layers, and there's like dimensions of it that's obviously like a surface level story, but so many layers of it that there's like so much going on behind the scenes with her and I that you can kind of still feel in the song. I don't know, like it's a very like it's a good piece of art, like it's a good project, like it's smart, but like still distilled down enough to be digestible. Because, you know, I don't think every person on the planet is going to be able to digest like the complexity that I've just outlined. Yeah, I think In Search of the Antidote captured the vibe, or like what the vibe was for her, I imagine. Like, I obviously went through so much different stuff to her. Like, I'm just kind of seeing like what she went through the art. Like, I didn't really have a good pulse check of like what she was going through when I was obviously going through a lot of stuff. And yeah, of course, like life is like infinitely more complicated, and she's obviously distilled a lot of stuff down and simplified a lot of stuff. Like, I definitely think she's distilled everything down to like very simple stories, very simple feelings that, you know, like I think a lot of people would resonate with. Like, I think she's picked out the things that, yeah, she went through that I think are pretty like shared experiences. And yeah, turn them into shared stories and experiences, as well as, you know, I think she's obviously simplified all the muses as well, and used them very artistically to represent certain things, and yeah, like blended a lot of muses together on every song. Like, I don't think there's a single song that only has a single muse. Like, there's multiple muses and multiple levels to every single song on the album. And like multiple kind of timelines being warped into one, like a lot of the time with a lot of the songs. And yeah, like lots of kind of like, you know, like when you get down to the crux of it, like everything's all in flashbacks, really. And so, yeah, like I think she's like definitely artistically like created something really cool out of like what she's been through. And, you know, like I can't imagine like how much more, you know, like insane her experience has been. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm assuming it's been just as insane as mine. But yeah, I think the way she simplified it down, yeah, is like, yeah, very clever, very artistic. Yeah, I think she was able to grab so many kind of like core, yeah, stories and feelings out of the experience that, yeah, I don't think I would have been able to do. And yeah, turned it into art, which is, you know, like, yeah, like very cool and commendable. And obviously that, yeah, there's so much in the album, and so much more than I could possibly, you know, describe to you in this video. But I've made my very best effort today to describe to you exactly what I think is in the album, or like the core of like the story arc. But yeah, if I was to boil it down, I'd bring it back to the Three of Swords. So that feeling of separation, particularly the feeling of separation from, you know, love and truth, which is ultimately a reflection of feeling separate from source. And so, yeah, I think that's really the crux of the In Search of the Antidote album, is all the times that she's felt separate from truth and love, you know, in her life, like up until now, all the things that had kind of, yeah, lingered and created suffering because she felt separate from truth and love in the past. And yeah, I think the album kind of like sets us up to be prepared for the Finding Rewilding sister album to drop, which I think is going to be more about, yeah, a more active process of connecting to truth and love, because obviously the songs on In Search of the Antidote, like I don't think any of them feel overly resolved in terms of, you know, going from feeling separate from truth and love to feeling connected to truth and love, whereas I'm expecting the Finding Rewilding album to like delve into that work a little bit more, because yeah, I think In Search of the Antidote is more capturing all the feelings of all the times that separation felt really evident, whereas I'm expecting, particularly given that it's going to be represented by the Lovers card, which is a heavy union energy, particularly like twin flame unions and soulmate unions, unions between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. I think that's what the album's going to be about. And I think In Search of the Antidote is a good precursor to it. I think it sets you up for, you know, like what to expect on the album, and sets you up for, yeah, like I think understanding the context through which Carrie's meeting the next body of work, like it's kind of like really laying out all of her history, so that you know, I think you can understand the gravity of what Finding Rewilding, of what I'm expecting Finding Rewilding to be. So yeah, I'm like, now that we've closed the story, I think we should go over how I'm expecting this transition from In Search of the Antidote into Finding Rewilding to go, given that I'm expecting it to be just around the corner. The last thing I want to include in this video is how and when I think the Finding Rewilding bomb is going to drop. Now that, we're obviously rapidly approaching the Australian leg of her tour, which I'm expecting to be rebranded into the Finding Rewilding tour to coincide with the release of the Finding Rewilding album. And I am quietly confident that this is the time. Like, this is obviously the last chance for it to be the time. So obviously I'm confident that this time is the time. But in my defense, there was a reason why I was predicting for the Finding Rewilding bomb to drop sooner for the most part, which, I will explain after I explain what I think is going to happen, because there was a back and forth that Carrie and I shared that led me to believe that it would be dropping sooner. And, I think the reason why it didn't was a little bit of like me misunderstanding how she was, responding to me and what she meant. And then also a little bit, I'm pretty sure some of the plans changed. I think things were supposed to come out a little bit sooner than now. Originally, long story short, the day before the In Search of the Antidote album dropped, I messaged Carrie asking if we were close to the Finding Rewilding release, because at the time I'd been speculating that it might be a double album drop, as in together, as in she would release the In Search of the Antidote album with Capital and the Finding Rewilding album with Lonely Lands Records Australia at the same time, because at the time it hadn't occurred to me that there might be a money issue. It hadn't occurred to me that, the reason for the delayed release of Finding Rewilding was so that, Capital could make money off her still. Because, obviously at the time I'd kind of assumed that they would feel bad about the situation they'd put us in, and wouldn't want to, drag things out that far. And, it took me a little while to click that wasn't the case. At the time I was like really thinking it could possibly be a double album drop, like at the same time, and have Finding Rewilding come out as like a surprise album at the same time of In Search of the Antidote. But I really needed to know if that was what the vibe was. So I messaged Carrie and created like a code for whether or not I was right with that theory. And the code was, we're blue for no and we're green for it's go time, like it is actually going to happen. I sent her that message at 2, and then at 4 she responded by posting this on her Instagram story, and you can see that she's inserted a little green snippet at the very bottom of the story, which, it seems like she just cut straight off my writing Instagram page. It seems like she cut out a little square from one of my posts and hit it at the bottom. And at the time, I messaged her when I saw it, which I saw it immediately after she posted it at 4, and then went to message her at my next opportunity, which was like about half an hour later, and showed her that I'd clocked the green. And at the time, I had assumed that because I'd clocked the green that it meant, yes, it was go time and that my theory was right. Mostly because, it didn't occur to me that the reason why she decided to respond this way by having the blue up the top, which was actually a blue background, she wasn't wearing it, and having the green down the bottom, was supposed to tell me that it's going to be In Search of the Antidote for a while and then Finding Rewilding. I didn't realize that this was supposed to be a timeline, which does make sense now because she is a Pisces and, of course she would find like an artistic way of representing what was going to happen. And this is the flaw of our system of like going backwards and forwards, is it's like so hard because it depends on me asking the right questions. And if I don't ask the right questions, it's hard for her to answer me. And I realize now that's how she was trying to answer me. She was trying to say that it's going to be In Search of Antidote for a while and then Finding Rewilding. But because she wasn't wearing blue up the top, I didn't take it that way. And I only clocked the green at the bottom. That's all I saw. And I just assumed that she didn't do the code that I'd asked, because there was lots of times that she didn't do the code exactly as I asked. She found a different creative way around it. And also she wasn't wearing blue. And, you know, I thought like maybe she inserted the green down the bottom because she was like away somewhere and didn't have like a lot of options to like choose from, and maybe didn't have anything blue or green where she was in her suitcase. So, you know, and, you know, like this is the flaw of our communication. So obviously I walked away from that communication thinking that, you know, it was go time, things were happening, and, you know, she'd actually tried to communicate that it's going to be in search of the antidote for a while, and then finding rewilding later. So yeah, like that was a little bit of like a miscommunication. That was her trying her very best to communicate to me what was going to happen, given that she's like very limited and couldn't actually say anything. Like I get what she was trying to say now. Like that's a very artistic representation of what was going to happen. It was going to be in search of the antidote and then finding rewilding. But yeah, like I didn't clock that at the time. And so I just kind of assumed that she wouldn't have gone to the effort to hide green on that post if I wasn't right. And yeah, also at the time, I was also assuming that things would come out sooner rather than later because, you know, I was assuming, you know, it was in everyone's best interest if everything came out sooner rather than later. Like I was like not sitting here assuming that they'd drag it out for, you know, another like few months. After at that point, we'd already been apart for like 500 days or something. So I was just like, surely it has to come out now. So yeah, that was like a little bit of a like miscommunication thing. And yeah, that's why I was like definitely assuming things were going to happen sooner rather than later. And I also think the reason why she mentioned August in the post originally when she posted it, even though like very clearly she meant April, was because she was also kind of like dividing everything up so that the timeline, like if this is August, if August is at the end and we're at like the In Search of the Antidote release at the top here, then where the green starts would be the start of July. You know what I'm saying? The last month is Finding Rewilding, but the first 3 months is not. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like she visually represented everything. Like I couldn't have asked for a better answer. It's just that I was not understanding what she was saying. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is the problem with the codes. Like I look back in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I get what she was saying. But yeah, I think like the miscommunication was a little bit like her assuming that I would know what she meant because, you know, I do think she assumes that I'm always picking up what she's putting down because I think I'm very often picking up what she's putting down. But, you know, sometimes I have a little bit of a hard time. And, you know, I think also what was tripping me out was obviously I'd put in my original message that she could do a flaming heart for it's going to be sooner, and then she could do a heart and flame separate for it's going to be later. And I think if she had to put that in the post instead of the white heart, then yeah, like I might have clocked it a little bit sooner or easier. But yeah, I think I think she was probably assuming I would know what she meant without it. And, you know, I kind of assumed that, you know, if it was further away, she would have used the code of like further that I gave her about that she could use if it was further away. This is the thing about the codes. Like it's very messy because, you know, it's based on a lot of assuming and we can't, you know, do anything if one of us is like not picking up what the other one's putting down. You know what I'm saying? Like it is a little bit flawed, the system. But we do our best based on, you know, like the situation we're in and the restrictions that we're under. We do our best to communicate. And, you know, like I think the hard thing is as well, like we're assuming on both sides. Like I think she was assuming I would pick up what she was putting down. And then also I was assuming that they couldn't possibly continue to drag this out given how much it had cost me. Like they knew that I was in a deep, dark depression for all of December and January after the whole like Errors of Us situation and the way that I was like completely blindsided by that. Like I was just like definitely projecting empathy onto the people behind the scenes of the situation and just assuming that they would make some sacrifices to make the situation better ASAP, given that, you know, like was struggling so bad and it had been like 500 days at this point. And yeah, like I was just like, I don't know, like I was also, as much as she was assuming I would pick up what she was putting down, I was also assuming that, you know, it was going to end sooner rather than later because, you know, I think it's a little bit crazy that it's gone on this long, and I just can't believe that, you know, more effort wasn't made for it to end, for this situation to be over sooner rather than later. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, so anyway, that's the reason why I've been guessing my butt off and assuming that things are going to come out sooner rather than later. Like a little bit because I'm assuming that that's in everyone's best interest, but then also because Carrie and I had back and forth, and the way that I'd taken her communication was that, it was happening around the time of the Antidote drop. But yeah, it turns out that, Finding Rewilding is dropping in July. And I am now realizing with 2020 hindsight, that's what Carrie meant when I asked her, am I not going to see you until your tour in July? And she sent back after tour flying, like that was the code response that she sent back. And, because she was on her European tour at the time, I had assumed that that meant after her European tour, she was going to come here. But I realize now that she meant after she finishes all of her scheduled tours, which her last scheduled performance at the time that she posted that TikTok was the 29th of June, which is today as I'm filming this video. She meant after she finishes her last scheduled performance, then she's flying. But yeah, I had taken it a little bit literally, and obviously thought that she meant that, after the current tour that she was on, she was flying. But, she meant after her last scheduled performance, she would be flying. So I'm expecting to see her really, really soon, to be honest. I don't think y'all will see me seeing her until, close to the Australian tour starting. I don't think you'll see me seeing her until the 11th or 12th of July, but, I'll explain all those details in a second. But yeah, I am realizing now that she did say when I would see her. I just hadn't clocked what she meant. I, again, misunderstood what she was saying. Because the thing is, I take things a little bit literally. She takes things not as literally as I do. And so then sometimes we get a little bit of a communication mishap. And that's definitely what happened. What has happened more than once. But yeah, I guess at least from all the mistakes we've learned, how each other communicates. You know what I'm saying? Through making so many fucking mistakes. I've realized a lot that, she communicates much better through artistic mediums and representing things, particularly kind of creatively, whether that's visually or, through music or whatever. She's a much more visual representation kind of communicator. And she also communicates well with her body, more so than she communicates well with her words, I would say. Not that she's not well spoken, but yeah, she's a much more, that's just how she communicates better. She communicates better through, obviously she's been limited, but also she's chosen to communicate what she's communicated in the way that she's chosen to communicate things. And she tends to choose a more artistic representation of communication when she tries to communicate with me. You know what I'm saying? The pattern's still there, even though she's been understandably limited. So I've learned a lot about how she communicates, and hopefully she's learned a lot about how I communicate, which is just very direct. I just need things to be direct and literal and exactly how it is, because that's how I understand things. And so, yeah, at least we've learned a lot about how to communicate with each other. But anyway, here's how I think the Finding Rewilding bomb is going to be dropped. I think the Finding Rewilding bomb is going to coincide with some other bombs that I am expecting to be dropping in the music industry, starting with Miss Taylor Swift. I think Miss Taylor Swift is currently masterminding a mass coming out in the music industry, where a lot of people that are in the industry will either come out as, queer of some kind, or they're going to come out as, potentially trans or gender queer of some kind. And obviously, if you've been following along with some of my previous content, Carrie has been alluding to being in that kind of second group of people that, are potentially going to come out in the music industry. Because, yeah, again, while she's definitely sexuality fruity, I think she's also very gender fruity. So I am definitely expecting her to come out with Taylor, and I'm expecting that to happen on the 30th of June, potentially at New York Pride. And just for reference, I'll insert some TikToks that I've made about why I think it's that particular day that, you know, everything's kind of leading up to, and that's the day that Taylor's going to come out, and a whole bunch of other people, including Fletcher, will come out publicly, as well as how I'm expecting this kind of like summer of love, this like mass coming out to kind of work after the fact. Clocked the 3, 2, 1 countdown starting on the 7th of June when Taylor slipped a line about daylight into her surprise songs at her Friday night set, followed by her slipping a line about Gold Rush into her set on the 14th of June, the next Friday. So after we got the daylight reference and the gold reference, I was expecting something big to happen the next Friday on June 21st, which just so happens to be National Daylight Appreciation Day. Especially considering that the TTPD logo is the sign for Gemini and the sign for Cancer smooshed together. And the 21st also just so happens to be the very last day of Gemini season, and the 22nd happens to be the very first day of Cancer season. But instead of something big happening, all we got was her featuring in a song that dropped about a secret sapphic romance. And no offense, Taylor, if you're watching this, but I don't know if you know this, that's not that big of a deal. Like, I don't see why you went to the lengths to hide the sign for Gemini and Cancer in the TTPD logo, considering that, you know, basically your entire discography is about forbidden love, about being in a secret romance, being in a sapphic romance. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just like, this is kind of old news at this point. Like, this is just every Taylor Swift song ever. Like, are we really going... we're really doing the most by hiding the sign for Gemini and Cancer in the TTPD logo and making a big deal out of this song dropping, when this song is basically just the same as all the other songs. Like, it's giving exactly what the rest of the entire Taylor Swift discography is giving. Like, the only difference is that it's on an album explicitly called The Secret of Us. Like, the only real difference between this song and every other song is that you're calling attention to the fact that this is about a secret relationship. You know what I'm saying? Like, but for anyone with more than 2 brain cells to rub together, like, that was inferred by the lyrics of all the other songs. You know what I'm saying? Like, everyone with more than 2 brain cells to rub together was picking up what you're putting down before you said it explicitly. So I'm just like, is this a big enough deal to be doing the most with it, essentially? You know what I'm saying? Like, to be, you know, flashing up 21/6 on your, like, Eras Tour, like, visuals, and to also specifically post the Fortnite music video behind the scenes on the same day in order to call people's attention to the fact that there was an Easter egg for that song in the Fortnite music video. Like, to me, it is just giving, like, it's making a huge deal out of this one song about a secret sapphic romance when every other song is exactly the same, babe. To be real with you, I was just expecting something way bigger to happen based on the amount of effort that was being put into highlighting that one day. And, you know, now that I'm sitting here looking at it again, now knowing that nothing major happened on National Daylight Appreciation Day, nothing major happened between the cusp of Gemini and Cancer season, I have worked out that the countdown wasn't a 3, 2, 1, go on 1 situation. It was actually a, we're counting down 3 weeks and then we're going to count down 3 days. Because this countdown obviously started on the 7th of June with a daylight reference. Then the next week we had a gold rush reference. And then on the 21st, we had a reference to the sun in the song Hits Different. Then the next week, on the 28th, it'll be her first show in Dublin, Ireland, and that's when she's going to start switching to counting down days. I'm expecting her to use more sun, daylight, and golden references, maybe even the exact same sun, daylight, and golden references in the exact same order that she was counting down the weeks in. And after she drops the last reference on Sunday the 30th, I'm expecting her to drop TS12, Karma, which was foreshadowed in her song choice on the 21st, because obviously in the song Hits Different, there's a line about being put into a car, as in karma. And if you flip the TTPD logo upside down, it spells out the word for reputation in Irish. Reputation is Taylor Swift's 6th album. However, the album that was supposed to be her 6th album was Karma. And the reason why Karma wasn't her 6th studio album was because there was some snakes that she needed to take care of. And coincidentally, the countdown to Karma, to the lost album, will occur in Ireland, which is snake-free. And the countdown just so happens to end on June 30th, which is the anniversary of Taylor Swift's Failed coming out. So now that I'm looking at it again, it obviously does make sense that Taylor was actually doing a 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day countdown. We need to go over what I'm assuming is going to happen after Taylor finishes her 3-2-1 week countdown, followed by her 3-2-1 day countdown. Obviously, I'm operating under the assumption that she's going to drop TS12 Karma on that day. And I'm also operating on the assumption that she's going to come out as some sort of sapphic on that day, given that it is the anniversary of the failed coming out from the Lover era in 2019. But I don't think she's going to be doing that alone. I think there are going to be a number of people, particularly women in the music industry, that are all going to come out on the same day. So far, the people that I think are going to be a part of this mass coming out as LGBT are Gracie Abrams, Billie Eilish, Sabrina Carpenter, Katy Perry, Kelsey Ballerini, Fletcher, Olivia Rodrigo, Kehlani, and Renee Rapp. I think all of these people will post something on social media for the very last day of Pride this year, and most of them will announce an incoming body of work scheduled to drop sometime over the rest of the summer. I think for the most part, each project will drop on subsequent Fridays, obviously starting with Gracie Abrams and Kehlani on the 21st of June, followed by Taylor Swift on the 30th of June. I think Billie Eilish will be next, and they'll drop a sister album to Hit Me Hard and Soft on the 5th of July. I think Fletcher will drop a sister album to In Search of the Antidote titled Finding Rewilding on the 12th of July. And then I'm not sure the order that the rest of the albums will drop, but I think by the time we get to Sabrina Carpenter's drop towards the very end of August on the 23rd, we should mostly be done by then. I think if Kehlani is planning on doing what Taylor Swift, Fletcher, and Billie Eilish are all planning on doing and releasing a sister album to their album Crash, which just dropped, which I am kind of expecting given how much King imagery they included in their Crash promo, even though, as far as I could tell, there wasn't any explicit references to Kings in the album. I think Kehlani will drop the sister album to Crash, potentially titled King, towards the end of this summer, maybe the week before Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet album comes out. I also think that Kelsey Ballerini's album will come close to the start, probably dropping in one of the later weeks of July. But I'm not sure about what order anyone else that's going to be in the middle is going to be. However, I do think Katy Perry will be last and her album will drop on the 30th of August. The reason why I think Katy Perry will be last is because she's obviously been using all of these oranges in the promo for her album, and Taylor has also color-coded Karma as orange, and I think it would be poetic if this landslide started with Taylor dropping Karma on the 30th of June and ended with Katy dropping Woman's World or whatever it's called on the 30th of August. I think the color and title of Katy Perry's album would wrap up this summer of love in like a neat little bow, and it would just be cute. Plus, on the back of the Woman's World vinyl that Katy dropped today, there's a butterfly. And butterflies are a symbol of freedom, which I think is the perfect way to wrap up this season of liberation. Plus, Taylor Swift will also be wrapping up this season of liberation with a butterfly. Because Taylor currently has this 12-week challenge going on, which you can learn more about by watching Nikki's video, which I've linked in the caption below. But essentially, each week is dedicated to one of her 12 albums. And the final album in this 12-week challenge is Debut, and the symbol for Debut is a butterfly. Debut is currently scheduled to take up 2 weeks on this 12-week plan, given that Karma hasn't dropped yet. However, once Karma drops, I am expecting Taylor to change the second last week to a Karma week and leave Debut as the very last week for the 12-week challenge. This challenge is scheduled to end on the 12th of September, and I am expecting Taylor to drop Debut Taylor's version the following day on September 13th. Taylor actually Easter egged this in the Karma music video, because in this scene she's wearing green, which is the color for Debut, and she's carrying wheat, which is associated with Virgo, which is the sign that rules over most of September. And the reason why I personally think it's so poetic for Taylor to be wrapping up this mass coming out in the music industry by dropping Debut Taylor's version has to do with what Debut represents, and also why she's dressed as Dorothy in this scene from the Karma music video, and also the day that I'm expecting Reputation Taylor's version to drop. Personally, I think the reason why Taylor's going first, followed by all of these other LGBTQ artists in the music industry, because in her mind, I think this represents handing over the baton to all of these young LGBTQ artists for the new era of music. because I think she's planning on either retiring completely or at the very least putting Taylor Swift TM the brand to rest. I think she's going first, expecting all of the subsequent albums released by all of the subsequent artists to dethrone her as the current #1 pop girly. I think she's releasing Karma fully wanting and expecting it to get buried on the charts by all of the subsequent albums. And I think to her that will be a poetic way to go. I think she's finishing this landslide with releasing Debut to represent a new dawn for new artists, new emerging artists, and for her to retire, essentially. And this scene where she's dressed as Dorothy from the Karma music video is also foreshadowing this, because this is a reference to something very similar that Elton John did when he decided to retire. And I think that's why Reputation Taylor's version will come last. I think it will drop on the 13th of December 2024, because I think it would make sense for the very last body of work that Taylor Swift ever puts out to be Reputation, given that Reputation at its inception was supposed to be reclaiming her reputation, untarnishing it. And by dropping Reputation Taylor's version last, she will be leaving that reputation that has now been untarnished behind. She is now leaving a legacy behind. And that's what she will be known for. Henceforth, that's what her reputation will be, a fucking legacy. And that's why she recently said at the Eras Tour that come December, that'll be it. That's it. It's all over. Because she is retiring. I do think she wasn't specific about which December would be the end deliberately, because I do think she's going to do one more year of the Eras Tour in 2025 to wrap up her career. And I think she won't announce that until Reputation Taylor's version comes out. I think the Eras Tour will end in December 2024. Reputation Taylor's version will come out. She'll announce that she's retiring and doing one more year of the Eras Tour, one more lap around the world. And then in December 2025, that'll be it. She'll be all over. I think she'll do the last year of the Eras Tour with this banner now complete with all 12 squares belonging to all 12 albums. And she'll make sure the whole world sees the full set, the original Eras Tour set, plus the TTBD set, plus the Karma set that I'm expecting her to add in to the tour after Karma drops. And then that will be the end of Taylor Swift, TM, the brand.
So yeah, I think the Finding Rewilding bomb is being released to coincide with the scheme that Taylor Swift is currently scheming, which, you know, does serve a lot of the people who have been, you know, involved in this situation in the background, because for a similar reason why people who might hypothetically be committing war crimes wait and choose to commit those crimes when there's other things going on. For example, the Met Gala or Met Ball or whatever it's called, you know, for the same reason why they choose to do that, it, you know, is smart that, you know, if some secrets are going to be revealed that, you know, don't cast you in a good light, it's best to do that amidst other chaos, amidst other things going on. For example, like Taylor Swift coming out and lots of other people in the music industry coming out, like that kind of heat can take away the heat from yourself if you've done fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Which is, you know, potentially why Carrie started hanging out with Katy Perry immediately after she started leaving all those clues that she was leaving the label. You know, I find that timing very interesting that all of a sudden she pops up with Katy Perry, who it seems like is also in on this scheme at the same time that, you know, she was leaving clues that she was leaving the label. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd specifically organised for all this to play out exactly as it has, when, you know, there was going to be a lot of things going on. So they could potentially slip the Finding Rewilding bomb out, and there would be enough other chaos going on that people maybe wouldn't be as mad because, you know, they'd have other things to focus on, even though they should be mad. You know what I'm saying? Same reason why, you know, Rafa was getting, you know, not having a good time when the Met Gala happened this year. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a similar kind of vibe. And, you know, I would hazard a guess very intentional, in order to, yeah, take away some of the heat from, you know, people who have had something to do with the situation. Yeah, like it's giving intentional anyway.
And yeah, I'm not surprised that it's all coming out at the same time, that, there's going to be a lot going on. That makes sense to me. I think it might have been nicer for it to come out sooner rather than later, just for empathetic reasons. But, I get why for strategic reasons, this is the timing that was agreed upon. So yeah, essentially I'm amending what I said in my marketing video where I was speculating about what I thought the terms of Carrie leaving her current label would be. In that video, I said that I thought the terms would be that, first of all, they could make the money that they wanted to make, and that second of all, there'd be some sort of like agreement about, what the public narrative would be around her leaving, which, I'm guessing that they're going to play it as, that her contract that had just expired. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if she was only contracted to 2 EPs and 2 albums to begin with. But even if she wasn't, I assume, the story that will come out will potentially be her contract was over and she wanted to move here anyway. Like, that's what I would assume would be the story. I don't know how they would justify like the reason why we hadn't spoken in all this time. I'm assuming there'll be some sort of spin on that. I hope it's the truth, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's spin. And yeah, I think now looking back and seeing how everything's playing out, I think the third condition of her leaving her label might be that when she does do the Finding Rewilding reveal and is released officially from her contract, it happens at a certain time, i.e. when there's a lot of stuff going on in the music industry, so it's distracting. So, the people who were affected by being lied to have other things to focus on, so they can't focus their energy on being mad about being lied to. I think that might have been the third deal in terms of, everything coming out, which, I don't know if it was totally fair. Anyway, I'm not going to have my opinion yet. I'm just going to see how things play out because things haven't finished playing out yet. And, for all I know, they could totally own that, the marketing ethos of this business is what caused this situation. And, they could go for honesty and they could, express a lot of remorse and, say that they're sorry, to me and to the fans and to Carrie. For all I know, there could be a lot of accountability taking. And so for now, I'm not going to comment until I see how everything plays out. But yeah, I do see the strategy behind, this particular timing, and I understand why all parties involved may have agreed to this, particularly given that, I think just from a universal timing kind of vibe, I think the timing fit for Carrie and, was definitely very workable for her to, have the release that she deserves for Finding Rewilding. Because this has been the hard thing, obviously, is obviously, the situation's really hard and I want it to be over. But at the same time, I know that Carrie's worked so hard on this body of work and she's really proud of it and she deserves to have, the release that she wants to have for it. She deserves to be able to celebrate all of her hard work in, whatever way, feels appropriate and, feels, honouring, the celebratory nature of the album. It's really not her fault that there's all this drama that's going along with it. You know what I'm saying? The album is about, kind of love and truth and a new era and an era of happiness and all that sort of stuff. So she deserves to have that kind of vibe going on around it. And, unfortunately, because she'd been previously signed to a label that likes to fucking lie, that was going to mar the release of the album, which, I don't understand how they didn't see that coming, at the start of 2023. I really thought they were going to change the plan when I was making videos because I was surely they're not going to want to mar the release of this album, given the album's supposed to be about, falling in love and, happiness and things, having the drama of being lied to for the sake of a marketing strategy come out at the same time wouldn't be honoring the project. So, like, anyway, regardless of what I think people should have done when they should have done it, like, I think Carrie deserves to have, this album get like a celebration. And I also think like the timing of things will allow her to do that, because I am obviously expecting like everything that goes down with Taylor Swift to have like a very celebratory feel, like a very like celebrating love feel, very celebrating like truth feel, which is like, very aligned with the Finding Rewilding album. So, I think the timing in terms of like her getting what she deserves, which is, a celebration of love, and a celebration of her truth and a celebration of her freedom, I think the timing does fit that and will help facilitate that, because, I think it could have like, very, very easily been overshadowed. And the thing is, and this is the thing that's hard, because, I think she deserves, to have this album and this project be honored the way it deserves to be honored, but also like she deserves to be seen in the pain that she's been through for the past 600 days. And so do I. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the tricky thing about this situation. Like, I want that celebration because it's very aligned with the body of work. But then at the same time, like, we've been through a lot. And, like, I think we deserve to have that, pain and heartache that we've been through, like, acknowledged, and seen and heard. And, like, also, the people that have been lied to, also deserve to have their pain seen and heard and acknowledged. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a bit of a tricky situation. And, like, I do think as well, like, all the pain that Carrie and I in particular have been through, like, we also deserve to have, like, this kind of end in, like, a meaningful way. Because, it would also kind of suck to, like, go through everything that we've been through and have this not end well. You know what I'm saying? Like, we also deserve, like, a good ending for, like, the amount of pain, and an ending that feels like proportionate to what we've been through. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think if everything had been just like kind of cut cold turkey at some point, which there were plenty of times where, like, I probably would have preferred that everything got cut cold turkey, and just like, the whole strategy of everything and the whole like money making side of everything just got cut. Like, there were so many times that, I would have, been down for that. But at the same time, I'm like, I think, after everything that I'd been through, I think that would have felt like a letdown, and would have, like, I think been almost a little bit traumatizing, you know what I'm saying? Like, to go through all of that and then just to be released without some sort of, I don't know, like something. Like, I feel like the kind of pain and suffering that we've been through, like, we need something. We need some sort of like meaningful end, some sort of like closure of this situation. And, like, I think a celebration would be good. I also think accountability would be good, and healing as well. Like, so it's like a tricky one. And like, from what I can tell from where I'm standing, it does seem like Carrie's trying to do that. Like, Carrie's trying to, orchestrate things to, have that like kind of meaningful closure, that, like, acknowledges the pain, but then also celebrates, the era of like love and freedom and stuff. Like, it does seem like that's what she's doing, and that's what she's orchestrating in these particular, in the particular sequence of events that I'm expecting to happen. Because essentially what I'm expecting to happen is obviously on the 30th of June, which, by the way, if you're not aware, that is the anniversary of Taylor Swift's failed coming out. She was rumoured to be planned to come out on June 30th in 2019, when she was in a alleged romance with Miss Carly Kloss. Apparently they were going to be coming out being sapphic together. Apparently that was the plan. And I think it's very, like, it's very appropriate that, on that anniversary 5 years later, Taylor's going to have, her second coming out, but this time with so many people from the music industry. And obviously I think Carrie's going to be one of them. I think she's going to come out as trans of some kind of flavor, either like non-binary or genderqueer or something like that. Because obviously her energy is like very boyfriend, girlfriend, like very strong masculine energy. Anyway, she'll tell us how she feels in terms of her gender expression. I'm not 100% sure what she'll say, to be honest. All I know is her energy, and, I don't really know what her experience of her energy is, and how she, identifies. But yeah, I think we'll find out on the last day of Pride this month. I think, she'll let us know. And I think that will start the wheels turning for the Finding Rewilding reveal. Essentially, I'm expecting the Finding Rewilding reveal to go one of two ways. The first way is that when she expresses like her truth, when she comes out in some capacity on the last day of Pride, I'm expecting that she might also announce the body of work on that day if all the other people that come out on that day likewise announce a body of work. However, alternatively, I think she might potentially come out on that day, but then sneak over to Australia secretly. Like, obviously, I think she's going to be like vlogging some of it for you guys. But yeah, I think if she doesn't announce Finding Rewilding when she comes out, I think she'll sneak over here and wait until right before the album drops to like make the announcement. Particularly given that, I'm expecting Karma, the album, to pop up unannounced for Taylor to release it without warning. And, I think Carrie could essentially do the same, particularly given that, if she is following in Taylor's footsteps, and Taylor obviously kind of announced Tortured Poets and is going to have Karma pop up unannounced. And then, when Taylor's done this previously with the two sister albums, Folklore and Evermore, she only gave both of those albums a little bit of warning. I think she gave people like maybe a day for Folklore and like a few hours for Evermore. I think Carrie might potentially follow in her footsteps and not make the announcement until the 11th of July, by which point I'm expecting her to have been here for like over a week, or at least a week. And regardless of the route she takes, whether it's more like public or more private, whether she announces the album when she comes out and gives everyone 2 weeks of warning and, probably takes people along in real time of like her getting ready to come over here and getting over here and, probably vlogging a lot of it. Or if she comes out but doesn't say anything and sneaks over here and like quietly vlogs it to like reveal to you guys later. I think regardless of which route she takes, I think the album is scheduled to release on the 12th of July. And the reason why this date is significant is because, first of all, we told each other that we liked each other on National Coming Out Day in the States. It was the 11th of October in the States when we told each other that we liked each other, which just so happens to be National Coming Out Day, and also just so happened to be the day that Taylor Swift announced Snow on the Beach, which became our song before we'd even heard it, because of, the significance of telling each other that we liked each other on the same day that Taylor Swift announced a song about falling in love with someone and having it feel super magical because you kind of can't believe that they're falling for you at the same time you're falling for them. So I'm really not at all surprised that this, period of separation, given that it started with Taylor Swift, is also going to end with Taylor Swift. Like, I find that quite poetic, especially given that, given the significance between National Coming Out Day being the day that we told each other that we liked each other and, the ball kind of like rolling in terms of the Finding Rewilding era, starting with the anniversary of Taylor Swift's failed coming out, like that kind of like synchronicity is not lost on me. But anyway, back to my point after that little detour, it turns out that the 12th of July, which is the day that I'm expecting Finding Rewilding to drop, it turns out that that day is exactly 639 days after we told each other that we liked each other. Because obviously it was the 11th of October 2022 in the States. It was the 12th of October 2022 in Australia, because obviously we're in the future. And turns out that the amount of days between those days is 639. Of all the numbers, it is 639. Like, what are the odds that that just so happens to line up? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's not a random number. If you've watched the numerology section of this video, which I'll make sure I include a little timestamp below in case you missed it and you need to go back. Like, if you're familiar with the 369 numerology, like, that's not a random number. That is a completely significant number to our connection. And yeah, like it is wild that, all of this just happened to coincide with, those three numbers. Of all the numbers, why those three numbers? Like, it's actually a little bit crazy. And Carrie actually Easter egged all of this in her first 3 posts on her Instagram after she wiped all of her social media at the beginning of the In Search of the Antidote era. Because on the 12th of July, the amount of days that finding Rewilding will have been a secret will be 639 days. The number 6 is associated with her previous relationship, given that that relationship was a shadow mate. The number 3 is associated with karmic relationships and karma in general. And the number 9 is associated with soulmate connections and the era of us being united, no longer being in separation. And in this number, the 3 is in between the 6 and the 9. So it's the 3, the karma, the karmic relationships, that's blocking the transition from the 6 into the 9. And if you go back to the 3rd post on her Instagram, aka the post that's associated with karmic relationships and karma, you'll notice that she's wearing white, which in the Finding Rewilding universe is the color that represents celebrating the end. And she's also wearing snakeskin boots, which could mean that this post visually represents the end of the snakes, aka the people that kept us apart, the people at her label that were making these sketchy calls, making these very snake-like calls, the people that were a karmic relationship for Carrie. They were a 3 blocking the transition from her 6 to her 9. And that might explain why Carrie's last shows in her European tour were in Dublin, Ireland, which is famously snake-free, and why when she posted her tour vlogs from Dublin, Ireland, they appeared on the Found Fletcher Instagram rather than the Finding Fletcher Instagram, where all the other European vlogs had appeared, especially given that Taylor Swift's countdown to her coming out is likewise happening in Dublin, Ireland. And Taylor is likewise doing that so intentionally to represent the end of the snakes, the end of her having to release the Reputation album instead of the Karma album that was originally planned to be TS6. It's literally all connected, even down to the fact that Taylor's obviously doing a 3-2-1 countdown. And if you go back to Carrie's Instagram and look at the first 3 posts and likewise count down 3, 2, 1, it starts with this Death of the Snakes post, obviously the snakes being what blocked what was supposed to come out, Finding Rewilding, from coming out on 12/8 if you're American, but 8/12 if you're Australian, what was supposed to come out on my birthday last year. Then after the Death of the Snakes, we have A Story of Love, as in the Forbidden and Star-Crossed Lovers, also known as Romeo and Juliet, which is one of the most famous love stories of all time. It's one of the greatest love stories of all time. And then after the Story of Love, we have the Era of Us, and of course, we have Oz hidden in the song card title. So it literally spells out there's going to be a Death of the Snakes, and then the Story of Love begins the Era of Us in Australia, where she's moving to. Like, that's crazy. That's some Taylor Swift level mastermind stuff. And if you want to see it get crazier, let's look at that Death of the Snakes post one more time, because you might notice that that was posted on the 7th of December, which to an American is 12/7, but to an Australian, that is 7/12. And what's the reverse of 7/12 and 12/7? What's the reverse date, I ask you? The 12th of July. So if you as an American read the date of the 3rd post in the way Australians read it, you would get July, and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? And that's going to be the day that Finding Rewilding comes out, and that's going to be the day that the snakes die. The day that Finding Rewilding comes out under a different label and Carrie is free. Carrie is free from her old contract. And there's one way that that gets even crazier that I can't even say. Like, Carrie has to tell you that, but trust me, like, when Carrie starts saying some stuff, like, y'all need to put 2 and 2 together and realize that, what she's, like, is about to reveal, what the Finding Rewilding album is about to reveal in terms of, her gender expression. I think, that lore is only going to get crazier. You know what I'm saying? So come back once she reveals what it is she's going to reveal, because I have a feeling that, yeah, that's going to get crazier, and it will be way more obvious once she reveals what she's going to reveal. But yeah, I really can't say anymore because it's not mine to say, and so I won't say anymore. I'm just going to leave this video here on this, like, you know, piece of intrigue. The only other thing that I will add is that, you know, I obviously think that the Lesbian Crush music video is going to drop on Wednesday the 17th of July, which just so happens to be the anniversary of the very first time Carrie found me on TikTok and interacted with my content. And other than that, like, that's all the predictions that I have for you. Like, that's all I'm going to say for now. And I'm just going to let everything play out. And yeah, obviously I am expecting us to, you know, talk publicly at some point about like everything that happened. And it might be on this channel, it might be elsewhere through other mediums. But you know, I will be back on this channel, like, posting stuff, I'm sure. So you should definitely subscribe to come back for that. And you should definitely like and comment on this video, especially after everything has come out and you're looking at it with 2020 hindsight and like seeing how crazy it was looking to me before it even happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was seeing the writing on the wall, and, you know, I was sitting here being like, this is going to be crazy. And yeah, if you're looking at this video with 2020 hindsight coming back after everything that's happened, go fucking bananas in the comments and just be like, that's wild, because, you know, like, I'm sitting here being like, this is so wild by myself right now. But yeah, anyway, I think that's all for this video. Like, it's been really fucking long. And so, yeah, I need to start editing because it's obviously the 29th at like 11 o'clock here. And so I really need to like edit and upload this before everything comes out. And so, yeah, that's the vibe. Thanks for tuning in to this like wild story. And yeah, see ya on the other side.